Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Planning Public Hearing. And Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street. Today is Wednesday, July 9th, 2014. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Here.
Commissioner Bessa.
Here.
Commissioner Cantor.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delauss.
Here.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, June 25th, 2014.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, minutes are approved.
Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1 through 4, we have resolutions for adoption. Scheduling Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014 for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street.
On the resolutions, motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolutions are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 4. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 5, CDs 5, 6, and 7, N140359 BDX, in the matter of an application concerning the expansion of the Fordham Road Business Improvement District. For a favorable report on calendar number 5, Chairman Weisbrod.
Aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Always happy to vote yes on a bid. Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 5. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 6, CD 8, N140354ZAX, in the matter of an application for the grant of an authorization concerning Trooper residence for adoption on calendar number 6. Chairman Weisbrod.
Aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 6 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 7, CD2, N140362, BDR, in the matter of an application concerning the formation of the West Shore Business Improvement District. For a favorable report on calendar number 7, Chairman Weisbrod.
Aye, and I second the sentiments of Ms. Battaglia.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 7. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 8, CD2, N110024ZAR and N110025ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of an authorization and certification concerning 101 Flag Place and 20 East Entry Road. For adoption on calendar number 8, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 8 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 9, CD1, N140315ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 169 Castleton Avenue for adoption on calendar number 9. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 9 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 10, CD2 N140413, ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 430 Ocean Terrace. For adoption on calendar number 10, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 10 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 11, CD2 N140372, ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 190 Coverly Avenue. For adoption on calendar number 11, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 11 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 12, CD3 N140378, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 117 Madison Avenue. For adoption on calendar number 12, excuse me. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 12 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 13, CD3 N140333, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 124 and 128 Bedell Avenue. For adoption on calendar number 13. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Battaglia.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Del Turo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 9. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 14, CD4 C140386 HAM. A public hearing in the matter of an application for a UDAP designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property concerning the Irish Arts Center.
First, Madam Secretary, congratulations on getting through that, given your cold. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know it was hard work. The first speaker is it Vianda Simmons? Vianda.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chair Knuckles, and City Planning Commissioners. My name is Vianda Simmons, and I'm the Deputy Director of Manhattan Planning at the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. I am very pleased to testify in support of this ULURP application for the disposition, UDAP designation, and project approval of city-owned property to facilitate the development of the Irish Arts Center and the expansion of the Juan Alonso Garden. The city-owned property is located at 11th Avenue and 51st Street on Block 1080 and part of 103 in the Clinton neighborhood of Manhattan in Community District 4. This site is located in the now expired Clinton Urban Renewal Area, and the development of this project brings us one step closer to realizing the goals of the plan. Founded in 1972, the Irish Arts Center is a New York multidisciplinary arts and cultural center, which currently operates out of the former Hell's Kitchen tenement. The new Irish Arts Center will increase the center space from 5,000 square feet to over 30,000 square feet, and will include a multi-purpose performing arts theater, a dance rehearsal studio, classrooms, administrative space, street-level commercial space, and outdoor terraces. The project team worked very closely with the community to create a design that would fit in with the context of the neighborhood and also to address concerns raised by neighborhood residents. This project not only enjoys enormous support from the City of New York and local officials, but has received international recognition and funding from the Irish government. And we will hear more about that from the Irish government and the IAC centers themselves. Additionally, one of the architects on the project is a chief state architect for Ireland's Office of Public Works. This project is an outstanding example of a multi-pronged partnership and community inclusionary planning process to redevelop a valued institution. We appreciate your consideration of this ULIP application, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. Since the bell didn't ring at this time, I'm available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Questions? Ms. DeLuz.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for being here. And you used many superlatives, and I'm sure that the project is worthy of all of them. I'm just wondering, in terms of the disposition requirements, what kind of requirements is the city putting in place for maintaining this as a cultural facility over the long term?
Thank you for your question. Well, the ULIP application actually restricts the facility to community facility use. So we do have that in place.
Great, thanks.
How long is that
Mr.
restriction for?
That I will get back to you, but I believe it's for the duration. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Simmons.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Pauline Turley.
Just a few things.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pauline Turley, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of the Irish Arts Centre. I've been involved with the Arts Centre since 1997, including 9 years as the Executive Director. As Rhonda mentioned, the Arts Centre was founded in 1972 to promote Irish culture to New Yorkers and Americans of all backgrounds, which remains a vital part of our mission today. Though our programmes have always reached well beyond our Clinton Hell's Kitchen neighbourhood, we have been based there in a 3-storey tenement on West 51st Street since 1974. And for the past 40 years, we've been presenting Irish music, theatre, film, literature programmes in over 30 classes each week in Irish language, history, music and dance. I know we all agree one of the remarkable attributes of New York City is its wonderful diversity and the access all New Yorkers have to top quality cultural institutions. If you walk down Park Avenue, you pass Asia Society, Scandinavian Centre, Alliance Française. If you're Jewish or African American or Latino, there are wonderful museums and performing arts centres that you can take your children and grandchildren to in order for them to learn about their history and the story of their immigration to America. Given the contributions of the Irish and Irish American community, not only to New York, but indeed the entire country, it's surprising that we don't yet have a cultural home to tell the success stories of the Irish in America. We're excited to be helping to change that with our plans to build a new Irish Arts Centre that will be fully accessible and will allow us to better fulfil our mission to explore the links between Irish culture and other ethnicities and to share those links with New Yorkers of all ages and backgrounds. We're also excited to be part of the ever-developing Clinton Hell's Kitchen neighbourhood, which we've been part of for the last 4 decades. We appreciate your consideration, and we're very grateful for the support of the administration, the Borough President, the City Council, Community Board 4, and all the city agencies who've helped us to bring the project to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turley. Questions? Ms. Levin.
I don't have so much of a question as just want to offer my congratulations. I think it's maybe even one of those decades ago that you and I first met, and I was working on Community Board 4, and this was a gleam in your eye, and it has been a long road to get here, but it has to be very exciting for you. It certainly is exciting for us, so congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Ms. Turley. Aidan Connolly.
Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chairman Knuckles, Commissioners, good morning. I'm Aidan Connolly, Executive Director of Irish Arts Centre since 2007. The new Irish Arts Centre is more than simply about building a stronger, more sustainable facility for our organization, though it is certainly about that. But it's also about reimagining what any Irish Arts Centre, or indeed any ethnically rooted cultural facility, can be in the 21st century, harnessing the great diversity and high standards of New York City, the world's most dynamic cultural melting pot. Yes, it's about sustainable and accessible classrooms for the range of community education programs we offer. And it's about expanding the number of seats in our theater venue from 99 to 199 to increase our earned revenue capability. But it's also about providing a platform of innovation and collaboration that is dynamic and inclusive. A place for Irish artists to work with their New York counterparts on projects that expand the notion of what it means to be Irish and American and a global citizen in the 21st century. It's a place for projects like Cambria Douglas, where we paired the Irish writer and actor Donal O'Kelly with the African-American writer-actor Roger Guinevere Smith for a joint production about Frederick Douglass, his historic trip to Ireland, where he found common cause with Daniel O'Connell, the great liberator, on their shared concern about global oppression. I'll never forget standing in the rear of the theater at a post-show talkback where a young African-American woman, half African-American, half Irish-American, thanked the artists for inviting her to celebrate her Irish heritage for the very first time. Much more than bricks and mortar, that is the Irish Arts Center we aspire to build today. Thank you to all the individuals and agencies involved in helping realize that vision.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Questions? Thank you. The next speaker is Noel Kilkenny.
Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chairman Knuckles, Commissioners, good morning. I'm Ambassador Noel Kilkenny and I'm the Consul General of Ireland here in New York. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to represent the Irish Government at this proceedings, to express our enthusiastic support for this landmark project, and to articulate our thanks to the City of New York and all of the agencies represented here today who have worked so hard to ensure its success. The City's commitment to this project, including but not limited to the provision of City-owned land and capital funding support, has been well recognised by our government, including our Prime Minister, Enda Kenny, who was pleased to have the opportunity to express his gratitude and support to Mayor de Blasio on this in St. Patrick's Day earlier this year. Indeed, the development of the new Irish Arts Centre is another great chapter in the enduring relationship between Ireland and New York City. When completed, the new centre will stand proudly among the city's great cultural institutions, a monument to the great accomplishments of the Irish-American diaspora here in New York and around the country, and most importantly, a vital cultural and community resource for New Yorkers of all ages and backgrounds. In addition to the financial support provided by the Irish Government, we are proud We are also pleased to recognise the great contributions of Culture Ireland, an Irish Government agency that supports the export of Irish arts abroad, who have worked closely with the Irish Arts Centre team over the past several years, as the Centre's programming has grown in stature, and who have been closely involved in the development of the space programme and planning for this new facility. The project has brought our in developing the scope with a broad spectrum of stakeholders, from the range of both Irish and non-Irish, to audiences and donors and other key stakeholders. It has been and remains a great and inclusive team effort. Further to that point, I would like to take the opportunity to recognise the leadership and support of Joe Restuccia and his team at the Clinton Housing Development Company, who have been wonderful and reliable partners in helping ensure that this project meets the needs of the wonderful Hell's Kitchen neighbourhood the Irish Arts Centre has called home for 42 years. It's a great testimony to everybody involved that this project is on track to achieve a remarkable duality. It will serve as a dynamic new home for the very best of Irish arts and culture, while sustaining its roots as a great community arts facility on Manhattan's west side. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, in 2 years' time, Ireland will celebrate the centenary of its revolution, of its Declaration of Independence. More than half of those 7 who signed that were poets and playwrights. And we would see it as a marking tribute that in the centenary of our Declaration of Independence, to launch here in New York a wonderful arts centre. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kilkenny, and thank you also to the Government of Ireland and to the people of Ireland for their support of this endeavor. And I know all the citizens of New York appreciate it as well. So,
Thank you, Chairman.
questions, Mr. Kilkenny? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andy Breslin?
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chairman Nichols, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to speak to you for a few moments this morning. On behalf of the Irish Arts Centre, of which I'm a member of the Board of Directors and have been involved with the Arts Centre for more than 20 years or thereabouts. For many years, the Irish community has needed a permanent cultural home in New York, and we would really be proud of a place that represented the great contributions that Irish immigrants and their descendants have made to this country. A place for our incredible creative community, both here and in Ireland, to engage with and serve New York. Over the years, I have witnessed the great work of the Irish Arts Centre has done in fulfilling that mission, despite the severe limitations of a crumbling three-storey walk-up on 51st Street. Those limitations haven't stopped the Centre from playing an important role in the lives of so many Irish artists who started out at the Centre and whose careers have blossomed. And they include actors like Pat Short, who right now is performing on Broadway in the revival of The Cripple of Inishmaan, along with Daniel Radcliffe, who made his New York debut at the Centre some years back. And great filmmakers like Jim Sheridan, Oscar-nominated director for My Left Foot, which starred Daniel Day-Lewis, Terry George, the Oscar-winning director of the movie Hotel Rwanda. Jim and Terry met at the Centre in the early 80s and formed a collaboration that would lead them to great successes individually and together. Today, the Centre provides that kind of creative home for great emerging artists across a range of disciplines, from singer-songwriters like Julie Feeney and Declan O'Rourke, to dancers like Colin Dunn and Dara Carr, to theatre artists ranging from the cutting-edge companies Fish Amble and Broken Talkers to emerging writers from the Abbey, Ireland's national theatre. The Centre also provides an important place for our cultural traditions to be preserved for future generations through classes in language, music and dance. But our current home is unsustainable and does not provide the kind of platform that is appropriate to the cultural stature of a country that has produced generations of great artists and writers, including 4 Nobel Prize winners. The new Irish Arts Centre is an idea whose time has come, and as a New Yorker and an Irishman, I am proud to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Breslin. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Carl Krebs.
My name is Carl Krebs. I'm a partner with Davis Brody Bond. Thank you, commissioners, for having us here today. I've had the privilege of working with the Irish Arts Centre for the last 2 years and with my colleagues in Ireland at the Office of Public Works. As an architect, I feel that this institution really has put its imprint on the design and the building in a number of ways. I think foremost, as everyone's alluded to, are the long roots in the neighborhood, and this design process has really taken a lot of time to talk to the neighbors, to talk to tenants, to talk to the Clinton Housing Development Corporation, the community board, and the design reflects their actual voice and input, both in terms of the massing, the continuity of the fabric of the street, the choice of materials, the continuity of brick, the preservation of existing facades. And I think that this is a testament to the strong value that the Irish Arts Centre pays to its neighbors. I think the second critical and perhaps unspoken aspect of the Irish Arts Centre is a sense of Irish hospitality and the idea that this is a very welcoming and inviting building. This is not a commercial theater, this is a community center, and it's reflected in the design, in the way that the lobby is open to the street, the way that the program offerings are given throughout the day, and also how the building is integrated with the garden and both 51st Street and 11th Avenue. I think the third point, and one that's been made by many people here, is just to stress the quality of the cultural offerings in this institution. You know, Irish heritage is a very important part of the mission, but so is the creation and innovation of new artistic efforts, both in performance as well as visual arts. And I wanted to stress that the fitting and the program and the equipment and the technology that we're employing here in this theater is at the highest level and the highest standard, which I think really befits a cultural center, a cultural facility in a city like New York with its highest standards of performance and art. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krebs. Questions? Ms. Delaluz.
Hi, thank you for delving a little bit deeper into the design. I'm just wondering, how did the collaboration work out between your firm and the architects in Ireland?
It's very well, actually, and we are probably going to be on the phone with them in about 3 hours, or 2 hours because of time difference. We had to delay our meeting because of the hearing. It's been a very successful meeting of minds. I think there's a real intersection of value and belief and philosophy in terms of the design, and that we will continue to work with them closely over the next year as we implement the project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Levin.
I'm sorry. Yes, I wonder if you could just tell us, I see there are 3 entrances shown at least on that plan.
Yes.
Could you describe how those various entrances will be used? Which will be the main entrance,
Sure.
or is that even a concept here with so many different activities going on?
Yeah, I think in short, I can make it simple. This entrance on 51st Street is going to be mostly for servicing the theater. There'll be a freight elevator back here, and this provides a passage through for deliveries. The main entrance will be on the avenue. There's a very large public lobby and amenity that's seen as being open during the day for community members and probably for small informal events. There's a secondary entrance off the garden. This entrance can be used. We have a small venue in the back that could access through the garden. It could also be used as an exit. It's also absolutely helpful as a fire egress path from the rear of the building.
I see. So I guess that I do have a follow-up question about, I guess, what you describe as the secondary entrance. It has to do with the design of the garden. Has the garden been designed?
Yes.
To what extent is it garden, and to what extent is it entrance to your building, and how do you balance those
Yes.
2 uses?
I believe we were going to have a speaker on the garden, so maybe it would be easier for them to, just because of time's limitation, I'd
That's
rather
fine.
have them answer that.
Good, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Jean Daniel Noland.
This has been so moving, I don't know what I can add, but Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners, my name is Jean-Daniel Noland. I'm the Chair of the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. As you all know, during the Dark Ages in Europe, Irish monks kept alive the classical learning of Greece and Rome. Once they had learned to read the Gospels, the monks began to read and copy all of the old Greek and Latin pagan literature that came their way. And what they knew, the Bible, the literatures of Greece, Rome, and Ireland, we know because they passed these things on to us. By first copying and then disseminating ancient texts which otherwise would have been lost, the transmission of European culture was assured. And that is how the Irish saved civilization. And if you approve this application, the Irish will save the West Side. The West Side was once the home of artists and actors and writers, and New York once welcomed artists and actors and writers. And we need to do so again if the civilization of New York is to be saved. The Irish Arts Center has come before the community and CB4's Land Use Committee since the fall of Rome, or at least a decade, I believe, to discuss its expansion. And it has listened to the community's concerns, 4 of which, to my mind and the community's and the board's mind, are paramount. 1, ensuring that the neighboring residents' privacy and quiet enjoyment of their home is safe. We have done so. 2, preserving Seibert Tire, a business that has been at 726 11th Avenue since the Dark Ages, or since 1916. The business will be relocated in the neighborhood. The owner has come to meetings to praise and offer his support for the center, and he's not even Irish. 3, designing a building that fits into the context of the adjacent early 19th century buildings at 565 West 51st and 564 West 52nd Streets. The board is very pleased with the choice of brick and stone for the 11th Avenue facade. The architecture of those old tenements on either side are based on the elements of classical Greek architecture and designed on a human scale. So is the new Art Center. And 4, creating an expanded arts center that will welcome artists, integrate into the community, and provide a vital new center for the arts and for learning in New York City. Now, wherever, can I just finish? I have 2 more sentences. Wherever they went, the Irish monks brought with them their books, many unseen in Europe for centuries, and wherever they went, they brought their love of learning and art and breathed new life into the exhausted literary culture of Europe. The new Irish Art Center will breathe new life into the West Side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Questions? I noticed there were 2 very long sentences. But
Well, I'm part Irish. But
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Battaglia.
I'm as much a lover of ethnic culture as anyone I know, but I'm really glad that the community board ensured that Cyber Tire
Yes.
would be relocated.
Yes.
Aptly. And my only regret is that I was a young child during the dark ages, as you described them. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
I think we just have to note the contributions of the French American in the room.
Merci.
Yes, as well.
Erica Baptiste.
Good morning. I'm Erica Baptiste, and I'm the community planner and associate at Manhattan Community Board 4. And I'm here today to testify on behalf of CB4 concerning the ULURP application known as the Irish Art Center. At the June 4, 2014 meeting of CB4, the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, along with IAC, presented the ULURP application, which provides for both the expansion and renovation of the existing IAC facilities and the expansion of the existing Juan Alonso Community Garden. CB4 was pleased to recommend approval of the application by a vote of 39 in favor, 0 against, and 1 present but not eligible to vote. The application includes UDAP designation and project approval and the disposition of city-owned property located at 11th Avenue and West 51st Street on Block 1080, part of Lot 103. The development site includes 726 11th Avenue, 553 and 555 West 55th Street. These actions will facilitate the development of a 5-story, approximately 30,000 zoning square foot community facility, the Irish Art Center, and the enlargement of the adjacent Juan Alonso Community Garden. The project requires approval of certain actions by the City Planning Commission, which are subject to the ULURP pursuant to Section 197-C of the City Charter. The development site consists of underutilized land that tends to impair or arrest the sound development of the surrounding community, with or without tangible physical blight. The project activities would protect and promote health and safety and would promote sound growth and development. The development site is therefore eligible to be an urban development action area, making the proposed project eligible to, MCB approves the UDAP designation for the development site. The development site is proposed for disposition to developer selected by HPD. CB4 approves the disposition for use as a community facility and cultural center. CB4 also approves the disposition of 555 West 51st Street for use as a community garden and park to an entity of CHDC. A mayor zoning override with 2 components is necessary for the project to be completed. Item 1 is a waiver of the requirements of zoning resolution 24-33B3 that allows a maximum height of a permitted rear yard obstruction to reach only 23 feet above curb level. The additional 3 feet is needed in order to meet the minimum heights required for the stage and backstage area and meet American with Disabilities Act compliance in the building connection. Item number 2 is a waiver from zoning resolution 23-633 to allow the front facade of the building to be 2 feet below the required 60-foot minimum street wall height to a height of 58 feet instead. This override is required as a result
of an institutional floor, which provides both mechanical space and acoustical isolation from the main theater space. It enables the surrounding parapet at the setback terrace in front of the dance studio to be an open railing, not a brick wall, which lessens the mass of the 11th Avenue facade of the building. And that's pretty much it.
Perfect timing.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Baptiste. Questions? Thank you very much. Oh, excuse me.
Just
Mr.
a
Taggart.
comment. I want to thank you for describing in detail the reason for the mayoral overrides.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Michael Sandler.
Good morning. My name is Michael Sandler, and I'm here on behalf of Borough President Gail Brewer in support of this application. The disposition of city-owned land for the purposes of enabling the expansion of a small arts organization is appropriate and commendable. The expansion of the IAC will further enhance the streetscape of the neighborhood and will add vibrancy to 11th Avenue, which is currently seeing a significant growth in residential population. Further, this disposition will add new high-quality open space to the neighborhood that is open for all. Not only is this project an appropriate use of city-owned land, it is an example of community-based planning. The Irish Arts Center has worked with the community board and neighboring residents over many years to refine this proposal. This collaboration has ensured the best possible project and has resulted in a proposed building that is appropriate to its surroundings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. Questions? Thank you. Joe Restuccia.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod, Commissioners. My name is Joe Restuccia. I'm the Executive Director of Clinton Housing Development Company and the Co-Chair of the Housing Committee of Community Board 4, Manhattan. I want to thank you very much for looking at the Irish Arts Center. This urban renewal area was started in 1969. Clinton Housing has worked with the urban renewal area for 34 years, since 1980. And this is yet another project that we are bringing this urban renewal area to fruition. It is a true community planning process that happened here. The fact that we have a cultural institution, not just housing being built here, we have stakeholders involved, that we have tenants and neighbors involved, that we have the ability for an art center to relocate a tire garage and keep a long-term business in place, to me is a testament to how the West Side works to make things happen in a way that creates balance. And I am very, very happy to say that the Irish government's participation here has been remarkable. The fact that our community is collaborating with the chief state architect of the nation of Ireland is a remarkable feat. And they understood the sensitivity to how you have to fit in an art center in the middle of a tenement neighborhood surrounded by people's homes with windows that actually look out on to this art center. So we've accomplished that. I want to thank you very much for that, very much. And the last piece is the Juan Alonso Community Garden. The Juan Alonso Community Garden will be disposed of to Clinton Housing. It is in a garden that exists already on the west side of the site. It is bifurcated by the entrance to 565 West 51st, preserved back in the year 2000 as part of a larger community development plan. This extension right here is Juan Alonso Park East. That will have a gate that is open during the day. It will be closed at night, and it functions as really a secondary means of entrance for the Irish Arts Center. The design will have a stream in the center of the garden. This will be the third stream that Clinton Housing has built in various open gardens. And we thought it was kind of a folly, but it's something that people really love very much. The water recirculates. And it really is a fully open park, and that's what it's meant to be. The cues to make it, for it to be this kind of park and be this kind of garden, were specifically our designer, Clinton Housing, spent a lot of time looking at various elements in Ireland and how to connect into this. So I like the fact very much that we have an Irish garden named for our long-term community resident, Juan Alonso. In the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Restuccia. Questions? Ms. Battaglia.
First of all, in my many years here, Joe, I've seen you testify many times, but never have seen you smile so much. My question is rhetorical. Do you realize that you didn't have to be present here today to be present here today?
Mr. Cantor.
Joe, I'm a little confused. Are you here representing the community board? Is it private development, or is it tokenet?
I have very recently been accused of being Irish in the last number of months, yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Estuccia? Ms. Levin?
Sort of hate to get into the details here.
Absolutely.
But right now, there's a fence.
Yes.
Wrought iron fence, accessible by key, that closes in the community garden portion that exists. Does that fence come down to open it up to the new addition to the east?
Yes.
Where are the fences?
Currently, Juan Alonso Park West is on a community garden key that opens up all the community gardens in Clinton Hell's Kitchen. One key opens all. Juan Alonso Community Garden in the middle is actually a plot garden, and that's gardeners having plots, and it's a different arrangement. They open it up during the weekends, but it's really people who are gardening, vegetables, things like that. The Park East, the fence currently just is straight along the lot line, and in order to make the park more open in the front, we really are moving the fence to create more community garden plots here and a wider opening so it's more.
Okay. So there'll be a similar wrought iron fence, and it will follow the thing that's labeled lot line on that plan.
Yes, and it will be a combination of a swing gate for egress, but a rolling gate, so during the day, when you walk by, you just walk into the park.
Okay. And then is there a fence at all along the street entrance to Juan Alonso Park East? From the sidewalk? Nope, to the right. Yeah, along there.
Yes, there is a fence here, but it will roll open during the day.
That's the one that opens and closes during the day.
So,
Okay.
so this will be open during the day.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Estuccia? Ms. Delausse?
Hi, Joe. Congratulations, and as always, your name is mentioned as part of realizing wonderful things. And congratulations to you and the entire team of people. Going back to the details for a sec. So I guess is that the door that the architect, Carl, I think, I forget his last name. Yeah, that's, and so that's a path that would lead out to the street.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the other means of egress. Is there possibility of the garden also being used by the Irish Arts Center for events? Was that discussed at all?
It's really, this is also a secondary entrance to the building, and the real question is, as the center evolves and figures out how it functions anew, there are lots of classrooms and lots of activities that happen during the day and during the evening, not just the theater. So certain people coming from the trains on the east may just end up coming in here, walking through, and that becomes their entrance. Whereas if you're going to the theater or something, and oh, I go there, that's where I go. It's never meant to be used for events at all. It's very much a community park.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you,
Thanks
Mr.
so much.
Estuccia. Next speaker is Brian Backscheider.
Thank you, Chair Weisbrod, Vice Chair Knuckles, and the commissioners. I'm here to read a letter from Kieran O'Connor, who's the state architect that's been mentioned several times today. He apologizes that he's not able to be here. His daughter's getting married today. But he managed
some excuse.
He managed to find time to write a letter. We got it moments before the hearing started today, so I'm going to read it off my phone, so I apologize for any kind of confusion that causes. I also apologize for not having an Irish accent, which would make this sound much nicer. Dear Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners, the Irish Office of Public Works is responsible for maintaining all state-owned property in Ireland, including its cultural facilities and historic structures. OPW also partners with local organizations on international projects which promote Ireland and Irish culture abroad. OPW is proud to partner with the Irish Arts Center on the design and development of the new IAC. The timing and involvement of OPW in the IAC project is far from coincidental. OPW is completing a variety of public works projects throughout Ireland in preparation of the centennial of the 1916 Easter Rising, which led to the creation of the Republic of Ireland. The IAC project is the sole international project of OPW to celebrate the centennial. Design of the new IAC is a reflection upon the centennial. The existing 726 11th Avenue garage was built in 1916, and its facade will be preserved and incorporated into the new IAC. Likewise, the existing IAC building will be incorporated into the new building design and will serve to remind patrons of the path IAC has taken to grow into the dynamic, modern, community-rooted organization it is today. The historic 51st and 11th Avenue facades also preserve the history of New York City and Hell's Kitchen, which has deep Irish roots. While the new IAC building acknowledges the past, it is also contemporary and forward-looking. The new IAC doubles the capacity of IAC's current theater, allowing IAC to grow its current cultural exchange with Culture Ireland, which promotes Irish culture worldwide and has shared a fruitful relationship with the Irish Arts Center. The new IAC will also contain a variety of flexible spaces which will evolve with IAC and allow IAC to continue to engage with the community in interesting, intimate, and unique ways. OPW looks forward to continuing to grow and build its relationship with IAC in the city of New York through the development of the new IAC building and the long-term cross-cultural artistic exchange between Ireland and the Irish Arts Center. Thank you, Kieran O'Connor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, the hearing will be closed. I will just note that in this pluralistic society that we all know and love, it is extremely rare to have unanimous support on virtually anything. It's if it's not one thing, it's another. So I really just want to commend all of those who have been involved in this project and wish you well and thank you for your efforts. Thanks so much. The hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 15 through 18. Calendar number 15, CD2, C140299 ppm. Calendar number 16, C140300 ZSM. Calendar number 17, C140301 ZSM. Calendar number 18, C140302 ZSM. A public hearing in a matter of applications for the disposition of one city-owned property and for the grant of special permits concerning 19 East Houston Street.
Well, in contrast to the prior hearing, let me just say that we will begin this hearing on East 19th Houston Street, or 19 East Houston Street, with speakers in favor for 30 minutes, and then we'll switch to speakers in opposition for 30 minutes and switch back as long as there are those who wish to be heard. And we will start with those in favor, and the first speaker is Jerry Johnson.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. My name is Jerry Johnson of the firm Fox Rothschild, and we represent MC 19 East Houston Street, LLC, the co-applicant for the disposition action, which is the result of an RFP from the MTA and the EDC to dispose of surplus MTA property to fund the capital program for the MTA. They're also the applicant for 3 special permits before you. The site is located on the south side of Houston Street between Broadway and Crosby Streets and is currently occupied as a storage facility for MTA vehicles. Includes a vent shaft for the Broadway Lafayette I&D station and an exit stair for the subway below, and includes a small fruit vendor on a month-to-month lease. The site is a highly irregular triangular lot with approximately 6,100 square feet of lot area that has a maximum depth of 63 feet on Crosby Street and narrows to a point at Broadway. It is proposed to develop the site with a commercial building with retail use on portions of the cellar, ground, and second and third floors, with office use on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. In addition, the proposed building will continue to accommodate the bent shaft for the subway, maintain and widen the subway stair to the station below. The proposed building will contain approximately 30,000 square feet of floor area, slightly less than the 5 FAR permitted by the underlying M15B district. The site is located wholly within the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The M15B district permits certain commercial and light manufacturing uses, including joint living work quarters for artists, at 5 FAR. However, retail uses are prohibited below the 2nd story, and the M1 district regulations prohibit most retail uses in Use Group 6 and Use Group 10A greater than 10,000 square feet. Standard M15 bulk regulations apply, which permit buildings to rise up to 85 feet or 6 stories, at which point they must set back and remain under a sky exposure plane. The site is an undeveloped lot in the historic district, and pursuant to Section 74-712, The Commission has the ability to waive use and bulk regulations, but not floor area, pursuant to the specific findings. The application seeks to, and pursuant to a report from the Landmarks Commission, which has been received and is in your files. The application seeks 2 actions pursuant to 74-712. 1, under 74-712A, to modify the use regulations to permit retail use below the 2nd story, and 2, under 74-712B, to modify height and setback regulations to permit the building to extend to a height of 98 feet 2 inches, 13 feet above the 85-foot limit. The height waiver was added during LPC's review pursuant to their request to have the fenestrations of the building line up with those of the adjacent properties. The 3rd special permit, under 74-922, will permit a retail use in excess of 10,000 square feet. The proposed building has 17,000 square feet of retail space, of which approximately 14,500 is retail floor area on floors 1, 2, and 3. The need for additional space beyond the 10,000 square foot floor area limitation represents the 3rd floor and is being sought to make the retail space more viable for potential retail users, maximizing the value pursuant to the requirements of the city's RFP for the property, and is necessary particularly in light of the site's size, shape, requirements and restrictions imposed by the MTA easements. I just have one small paragraph left. During the Community Board and Borough President review and with the assistance of the Borough President's Office, the applicant, EDC, and the MTA have worked with DOT to provide a dedicated loading area and to extend the sidewalk along Houston Street. I'm happy to report that DOT this week has agreed to provide the Crosby Street frontage with a dedicated loading zone, and more importantly, has agreed to extend Houston Street sidewalk by 3 feet, widening the width from 12 to 15 in this location. In addition, DOT has agreed to open the median at Crosby Street and to provide crosswalks on both east and west sides of Crosby and Houston Street intersection. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are we going to get a letter from DOT to this effect?
We can work to arrange that.
I would urge you to get a letter.
Yes.
Questions? Mr. Cantor. Oh, pardon me.
Oh, thank you, Irwin. Mr. Johnson, as a part of its findings, CB2 talked about the impact of this project on an existing fan plant that is apparently below the site right now. Could you speak to that? Is that fan plant going to be relocated? What is the status there?
The fan plant remains in place. It's the vent shaft for it.
Right.
And the vent shaft has been relocated subgrade as opposed to coming up through the site, and it goes out underneath the sidewalk and comes out at the edge of the sidewalk. And somebody from the MTA is here who will speak to that in a minute.
So its emergence would not be along the surface of the sidewalk, or where would it be?
There will be grates on the sidewalk. But the fan plant itself is not being impacted.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. Is that fan plant, is that exhaust or?
I believe it's primarily smoke exhaust in the event of an emergency in the subway, and it does provide some ventilation, but the MTA can speak to that more directly.
We're not going to have a Maryland road?
Not that I'm aware of, unless there's a smoke condition underneath the sidewalk.
The other question. You may note that thank you. You may note that Landmarks have requested that the building get taller because of the window fenestration.
Correct.
Desire to line up the fenestration.
Correct.
So you've just increased the floor to floor. You have not increased FAO.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Levin.
Mr. Johnson, I guess 2 questions. One relates to signage, which is maybe a more open-ended question. We'll put that one second. But one of the findings for I think it's the single retail tenant aspect of this project that has drawn the most objection from the community, and that's fundamentally the problem that the community board and borough president have with the building. I think otherwise people seem quite complimentary of the building and recognize its value to the coffers of the city. But it's the challenges that a large retail user will pose at this location that are of concern. And one of the findings for the special permit for the large retail location is that that principal vehicular access is not located on a local narrow street. And in your findings, you say that there won't be any parking or loading proposed along Crosby. So maybe that has now changed with the agreement with DOT, but I guess my direct question is, how do you comply with this finding?
Well, the vehicular access to the site, I mean, I believe that permit primarily was for much large, I mean, when the
Right,
findings
it's for
were drafted
shopping
for
malls.
shopping malls and
Right.
much larger retail permits. This is located on Houston, right at the corner of Broadway is the other main street, two major arterials through the city. Any cars coming to the site will primarily be located on those streets and coming in that direction, not coming from Crosby. Primarily, I think this is more going to be a pedestrian destination.
Oh, absolutely.
Just because of the location. And so I believe we meet that finding.
Right.
In terms of the loading, it's just a spot for trucks to park off the street. The other option was to use Broadway, the Broadway frontage, which has dedicated loading zones already. Crosby Street itself during the day has no parking regulations as it is until 6, and this would just extend it just for the location in front of the site in case a truck is there, so it's not backing up or blocking traffic on Houston Street.
And what's with the single retailer, large retailer planned, what is the frequency of trucks anticipated? I've not had a chance to look at the EAS.
It's not high. I mean, even though it's 14,500 square feet or 17,000 roughly if you include the below grade space, the size and shape of it make the selling area much more constrained than what that sounds. And I think that I mean, I don't know the exact number of deliveries. I think it's going to depend on the retailer that goes in. And we don't anticipate it being a lot, and we will work with them if there's an issue with the community to dedicate certain times where it can come where it will be less intrusive.
But the
if
current
there
plan
is
is
any
that all
problem at all.
those goods go in through the entrance on...
No. The plan, since all of this has gone through, and we will have to update the file, is that most of the retail loading will happen from the sidewalk into the store directly. The elevator configuration has been modified. There's a dedicated internal elevator for retail space only. And then the other elevator is a dedicated elevator for office and office use, which enters off of Crosby.
So when you say go into the store, do you mean...
They'll either come in off of Crosby or come in off of House.
I see.
And then the elevator is retail.
And then for signage.
Yes.
What kind of signage does your client plan, and how does that comply with... How do the zoning... Let's ask the legal question, because you're the lawyer. What limitations do current regulations place on the signage that can be put here, and how does that mesh with what your client is planning?
Okay, so in terms of the M1 district, advertising signs are permitted, but not illuminated advertising, indirect illumination. And then M1 regulations permit signs up to 40 feet, and I forget the multiplier, because on this instance, with the special permit, you're limited to C2 district regulations. And that's 150 square feet per establishment, 50 square feet, which can be illuminated. Obviously, if you have multiple tenants, you get more signage because it's based on the frontage of those tenants. But those are the limitations placed in terms of accessory signage. In terms of advertising signage is permitted, but again, for it to be primarily visible, it'd have to be on the building, which is governed by landmarks. And then you had asked a question at the hearing, at the review session, about signs being placed inside a building, because that's become an issue in other places. Currently, I know landmarks and buildings regulates space within 18 inches of a building facade and not beyond that. So if it's beyond that, it's actually not considered a sign, it's a display inside the building. That's not a hard and fast rule, it's not written anywhere. That's just kind of how the regulations have extended. If you read the zoning, it says on the building visible from outside. So it's a gray area that has kind of been worked worked on with the agencies over the years.
And how does
So
that
we're
work?
so we're subject to all of those regulations, just like everybody else is in Soho and you know the rest of the city of New York. But in terms of accessory signage, we're further restricted in that we're limited to C2 pursuant to the special permit.
Thank you.
Ms. Dela-Us.
Hi, Mr. Johnson. Thanks for being here. I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned, which is that the request for the waiver of 74-922 has to do with the fact that the city's, and really extending the retail to the third floor, was related to the city's, or not the city, but the RFP's request specifically for additional income. Can you speak to what the language in the RFP was specific to requesting waivers as part of that process?
I can't. I wasn't part of that process, and I can't remember the specific language, but it was, the point of the RFP was as I understand it, was a program sponsored actually by the City Council and the MTA to dispose of surplus property to fund the MTA capital program. And this is one of the sites that was identified. The vehicles that are used, that are stored here on this site are being relocated to another site funded by the applicant here to relocate so that this site could be developed. But the specific language of the RFP I couldn't answer to. We can try to get that language to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor.
Can we go back to Commissioner Levin's questions? I understood you to say that the sidewalk is being widened by 2 feet on Crosby?
No, there's no sidewalk widening on Crosby. It's on Houston Street only.
I'm curious though, you have a very small vestibule getting to the thereto. And even if a truck is loading or unloading over there, it hasn't got very much storage space on the street between lifts.
Right. Again, the plan that is in front of you, it needs to be updated. Things were modified as part of this process at the end. We haven't, but the plan here, this is the vestibule, which leads to the passenger elevator for the upper floors. The retail elevator is accessed from the retail facility, so that retail goods will either come in off of Houston Street or into the retail space and then taken up or down to the retail floors.
But they're ultimately going to head for the freight elevator, right?
The freight elevator for the retail is only accessed from internal to this retail space. We've modified that layout for that.
I also, any other questions? I also have some questions about the parking regulations. On Houston Street currently, there is no standing any time in the frontage of this
That's correct.
site? And that would,
there's a bus stop there right now.
and that would continue?
There have been discussions with the MTA and DOT as part of extending the sidewalk. They would want to move or relocate the bus stop that is currently on Houston, either 1 block north or 1 block east or 1 block west. I believe it used to be located 1 block west, and that's, and they're in discussions about where it would be relocated to.
And then, assuming that happened, the parking regulations on Houston would be no standing any time?
I believe so, yes.
So
we can confirm that, but it's that intersection. I believe they don't. Yes, no standing anytime.
So this would not affect in any way a lane of traffic?
That has been the major concern, I believe, during DOT's review on whether or not to extend the sidewalk widening. One of the outstanding questions previously was to create a loading zone for the facility on Houston, which would have limited, because of that concern, the lane of traffic. If it was 3 feet, it was going to be limited to 2. And they have decided to have it on Crosby, and then you get an extra foot on Houston Street. There is still a bit of a, right now there's currently a bump out at the corner of Houston and Broadway. That bump out will actually remain. I mean, it's not going to be extended, but there will still be some of a bump out. So there will be a little bit of a lay-by right there, but we will not be taking a lane of traffic out of Houston Street.
And on Crosby Street, if I understood what you were saying, the current parking regulations on the north side of Crosby is what, no standing anytime, but unrestricted after 6 p.m.?
That's as I understand it. I would have to confirm
in front of this site.
That's as I understand it, correct. I will have to
And
confirm that.
so that would change to,
There would just not be parking at night in front of this, on the frontage of the site.
It would be low.
it would be loading and unloading at night and no standing during the day, is that?
As I understand it, correct. Well, there's no parking right now during the day, so standing.
Well, but no parking is different from no standing. So-
I will have to confirm those regulations and get back to you. I'm not sure of those specifics.
Okay.
I know there's no parking. I don't know if there's also no standing. I'll have to confirm.
I guess and with respect to the parking regulations, would you be prepared to limit the hours of loading and unloading on that site?
We would consider it, yes.
Okay. A letter from DOT setting forth exactly what they're planning to do here would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Joe Chan.
Good morning, Commissioners. If I had known there would be so much talk about Irish monks this morning, I've brought along some Chinese monks, and they could have some cultural exchange about how do they remain masters of their own domain, because it's the 25th year of this Seinfeld show, so strike that from the record. Good morning. My name is Joseph Chan. I'm with the MTA Real Estate Department. Thank you for this opportunity to provide background remarks about the 19 East Houston Street project. This proposed development has taken about 4 years to get to this point in time. As you know, the MTA provides essential mass transit services to the city of New York and the New York metropolitan region. MTA operates, maintains, and invests in the transportation system without which the city and the region cannot function and compete economically or effectively with other major cities. However, coming up with the necessary funding for our capital investments and improvements has always been an ongoing challenge. An example of such capital investment is $133.5 million that MTA made recently to the Broadway, Lafayette, and Bleecker Street stations that surround the 19 East Houston Street site, making a full transfer possible between the number 6 train and the B, D, F, and M lines, and providing ADA access to the stations. 4 years ago, having been repeatedly encouraged by elected officials, I just want to correct the point that the gentleman made. It's really elected officials who asked that the MTA seek to maximize the values of its surplus properties. MTA began collaboration with the city through the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and the City Department of City Planning to evaluate MTA's entire portfolio of real estate assets owned by the city but operated by New York City Transit to determine which properties will be available to help fund the MTA's capital investment program. After an exhaustive search, only 7 properties were identified as surplus and made available for sale through the EDC. Out of the 7 properties, 3 are deactivated substations. Only 3 were expected to be of high value. Despite its very small size and triangular shape, 19 East Houston Street is one of the high-value properties given the location of the newly revitalized Houston Street corridor and its proximity to the Broadway retail corridor. In March of 2012, EDC released a request for proposals soliciting for submission of proposal for the East Houston Street site. The RFP balanced between MTA goals and city goals and generated a robust response. For the MTA, the goals of the disposition are to reduce costs associated with and derive maximum financial value from the property, with the sale proceeds to be directed to the MTA's capital program. For the city, the goals are to restore the property to the city's tax rolls, reactivate underutilized properties by fostering redevelopment, generate construction and permanent jobs, and otherwise further the city's economic development objectives. MTA worked closely with EDC to ensure the RFP process complied with the requirements of the city's disposition and rules and regulations and the selection criteria of the RFP. I just have 2 more sentences, I'll be done. Maston Capital selected because of its project furthers the goals and objectives and meets the criteria of the RFP. And in summary, this is a project which will help to contribute positively to the city, the MTA, and the local community. The project site will be put back to productive economic use. In a contextually sensitive development, the community will have a widened subway staircase, and the MTA will benefit financially from the sale of the property to continue its transportation investments for all New Yorkers. So I thank you for your time and your review and consideration of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Questions? Ms. Delos.
Hi, Mr. Chen. Thanks for being here. I had a question, and I don't know if you're the best person to answer this, but since you spent as much time as you did to discuss the RFP, or somebody from EDC.
By the way, the EDC staff is here to address.
Great. So I'll share my question, and then someone, I'm sure, will be able to answer it. So, one of the things that came up in the briefing materials is that originally there wasn't a contemplation of have the ventilation grates in the property versus on the sidewalk. And it was commented that some folks that were considering responding to the RFP had asked for the ventilation grates to be moved to the sidewalk even before responding. I'm just wondering if the agency has any concern about that, considering in this case, in the end, the ventilation grates will be external to the building.
During the RFP process, multiple requests were made by different developers, and they were all turned down. We made that comment to the community board. It's the same comment I'm making here. Requests were made, they were turned down. It was only after the contract was signed and then the developer submitted foundation plans for the MTA's review, because we don't want our system to be affected in any way, that the developers, architects, structural, and mechanical engineers requested that MTA take a look at the relocation of the easements because it affected the design of the building. It really constrained them. And it took a 10-month process, really literally a 10-month process in which they took the risk in the sense that there was no guarantee we would approve it. And tentatively right now, it is a conceptual approval. And it still has to go through the final approvals, and then it has to go, the New York City Transit outside projects has to give its final approval on that.
Okay.
Ms. Levin.
Yes, Mr. Chan, I have a series of questions about the configuration of the, presumably this disposition will be subject to an easement for the subway entrance?
Yes.
So the configuration of that easement, that's right now, a very crowded subway stair situation with people flowing up and down, and most pedestrians making a U-turn because where they're headed is down Broadway to the other large stores. So there's congestion there now, even without anything built there.
Yeah.
So how did you design
we did not design the staircase. The agreement was to widen the staircase. I think with respect to the design, I think I'll defer to Naveed, the project's architect.
Is that the developer's architect?
Yes.
Does MTA have requirements, though, about how much space is required? You must, stairs have to be certain dimensions, and
we'll get back to you because I don't New York City Transit staff is not here. 6 foot 11 inches.
That's for the stair.
I think, right?
We'll come back.
We'll get back to you on that, because I'm really not the best person to address that.
Okay. I think it would be very helpful, though, to know how it was decided that this this space adequate for the flow of pedestrians who are.
I think the current dimension is about 4 foot 11, and this would be widened to at least 6 foot 8. So that's at least a 30 or 40% more space that will be allocated to our customers. So that will be a positive contribution, and also the developer will be paying for that. We are not going to be paying for that.
Certainly is a positive improvement. But will the easement also include space at the sidewalk level as you head? Where does the easement begin? Does it begin at the top of the stairs?
It remains in the current location. This is an existing current easement. There's a permanent current easement that goes through the project.
But is it just for the stair itself, or is it for a certain volume of space where people standing at the head of the stairs?
I'm not sure.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, if we could figure that out in the course of this process, that would help
Sure.
me. Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Chan? Thank you, and you'll get back to us on. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Naveed Makami, am I pronouncing that right?
Perfect, thank you. We just get some more boards.
Okay, all right.
You get words.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Navid Magami. I'm a principal at Perkins Eastman Architects, S9. I'm going to start off by just giving you a little brief description and narrative of our design process and what we looked at. In this board, you will see Houston Street, 1929, circa 1929. Houston Street used to be a narrow street, very similar to Prince and Spring, going east-west. In 1930, in the process of building the subway system, the buildings were demolished. You can see actually the building that stood on the site, and then this is a picture during the demolition, and these are the maps illustrating the same. And the street was widened, became Houston Street, and this has actually caused a very unusual condition in the city right now, where the fabric of the city has been essentially sliced and scarred during all those years, creating a situation where the buildings don't have spaces and windows, and people are utilizing them for billboards, and it doesn't feel like a street. It feels more like a highway. The goal of our design, and this is a design that was actually presented to LPC and a certificate of appropriateness was issued, was really to create a healing of the urban fabric while recalling the slicing that took place at this location. So on Crosby Street, we employ a punch window masonry brick facade in keeping with what happens on Crosby Street. And as the building turns on Houston Street, we are actually using a metal and glass in keeping with Soho. It's a deep facade where we actually articulated 18 inches. That's what's very typical in Soho, but in a contemporary fashion, but also suggesting the slicing that took place at this location. As previously stated, in working with LPC, we actually aligned the buildings on both sides with the adjacent building, and this proves to be very effective, especially on the Broadway side, where you actually sense the slicing coming through and against the Hollister, the so-called Hollister building next door. I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about the ground floor here, because there was a lot of discussions and some of the improvements that are being made. So as Mr. Johnson described, the sidewalk has obviously been widened by 3 feet, and this plan shows the location of the grading on the floor. As well, there's a lot of questions about the subway entrance. The subway entrance used to be about 4 feet 10. It's going to be at least 7'6", not 6'8". If we are actually investigating, there is a foundation wall below that. If it belongs to our development, it may go as wide as 8'6".
Where'd you stop?
I can answer questions.
Mr. Knuckles.
Would you continue to elaborate on the subway configuration there?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So what we've done, if you look at the existing condition, the subway stair is parallel to Houston Street, which creates and narrows the neck down. We have widened the stair, but also made it parallel to the grid of the south of the site, creating additional pedestrian space. And also there is a setback about 10 feet to the edge of the wall on the other side, which will create ample room for circulation of pedestrians coming around. So the stair has been widened quite a bit, almost double. We are, and that I think will help mitigate some of the issues there. If you also look at as was discussed before, the floor plan is really constrained, and we end up not with a 6,000-foot retail floor plate, but this area here, and it's irregular, is about 4,800 square feet.
Thank you. Ms. Battaglia.
I imagine this is a question for you. A previous speaker said that the decision to move the gratings onto the sidewalk is not yet fully through the approval process. Were it not to be approved, is the sidewalk still going to be widened?
I believe they're not mutually exclusive. I think that's a decision between DOT. I would imagine there would be less impetus to widen it at that time, but that's really a decision by the agencies.
Ms. Levin?
Anticipating some of the testimony that I think we will hear from the community, and it's certainly reflected in their letter, since you're the architect and this is your chance to talk to us. This space has been designed for a single retail user with retail space on 3 floors, right?
That's correct. And there is a little bit of space below grade as well.
Okay. A number of advocates have suggested that it would be better used for more than one retail user. Have you thought about how the space could be configured to accommodate 2 retail users, and could you describe what that would do to?
Certainly. We have looked at the multiple tenant scenario, and I have to say, as all of us have seen, my practice does do a lot of retail around the city, and we've done, we see them. Retail is one aspect of the street life that is continuously changing. I mean, if a building is designed for a single tenant, 5 years from now might be divided into multiple tenants. Times change, people's buying habits change. That's something very fluid. We did look at it and see what would work best here. Given the various constraints, you can see here the blue area is what's the leasable area. It narrows down, it's about 7 feet here, it goes to about maybe 10 feet at this location. It's very shallow, it's very hard to actually divide it up. And furthermore, if we have multiple tenants on the 2nd and 3rd floor of this building, we would potentially have to have additional egress issues and corridors eating into the retail. So it becomes further restricted. It is, people are talking about this as a large retail. 4,800 square foot floor plate is not really that large a retail space anyhow. But it again, that's always a matter of perspective. But we have looked at it, and it's not very efficient.
Okay. Ms. Delavuz.
Thank you for being here. Just a couple different questions. One is the little mini triangle that is to the west. What will that be on the first floor?
I imagine, again, the space has not been leased, so
right.
I'm just speculating.
Sure.
But I imagine that would, really the biggest use there is probably going to be display for a retailer. It's not really large enough to and what's not really quite shown here is there is a column. You can probably see there's going to be structure in there as well. So right. By the time you're done, it's not very much left.
Okay. And then I believe there was some concern by the community board as well about the transparency on the glass. I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. I think there has been a lot of concern about the transparency at this end of the building. Currently, as envisioned, we have a space that goes from the 2nd floor to the top of the building, and it is, because it comes to a point, it's not really usable for office or anything above. So we have actually used it as an open area that could be used for display. Again, all the city regulations regarding signage, lighting, and everything else are going to be, adhered to. And one other thing that I did not describe in the design, we do in the recessed area, we have an 18-inch depth in the facade. The recessed areas employ a gradient, fritted gradient, if you're familiar with it, where they actually become more opaque as it goes up. So it goes up from 0 to 100. On the top floors, the recessed areas are totally blocked up. And beyond that, we're going to have beams and other additional obstacles in perception. So we're not designing a sheet of glass in front where people can do whatever behind it. There's going to be a lot of obstruction there.
And my last point is really just a comment. I appreciate what you shared in the beginning about the street being cut off and the lengths that you all went to try to heal. I think was the word that you used, and I think you've achieved many of the goals in your design.
Any other questions? I do have just going back to a question that Ms. Levin asked of Mr. Johnson on advertising signs. You could put an advertising sign on the top of this building?
Above it?
Yes.
I don't believe we could because it's landmark, but yeah, you
Could not?
Yeah, and it's above 40 feet anyway, I think. So.
Okay, thank you.
A billboard.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Switching to those opposed, Laura Tenenbaum.
Hi, my name is Laura Tenenbaum. I served as a member and then chair of Community Board 2's Land Use Committee for approximately 10 years. I have resided in a joint living work quarters for artists co-op in Soho since 1973. I'm struck by the contrast of the preceding application for the Irish Arts Center and what's being proposed here. The EDC did a disservice to the Soho community in accepting this proposal. They failed to find a solution that meets both the needs of the MTA to raise capital and the needs of the community for open space and affordable housing. I totally agree with the comments made by Community Board 2, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, State Senator Deborah Glick, with respect to the proposed uses. No need to repeat them. However, I want to elaborate on the problems the current plan will bring to Houston Street sidewalk and to Crosby Street. Neighborhood residents, people who work in the area, and tourists, all with diverse trip purposes, currently use the sidewalk adjacent to 19 East Houston Street. Right now, with an undeveloped adjacent site and no grading, the sidewalk there is too narrow to accommodate current pedestrian trips. It is overcrowded on weekends and during rush hour. At times, people step into the street to get around slower pedestrians. Soho hosts a lot of tourists, and they tend to move slowly and in groups. They're not used to navigating crowded sidewalks. The subway entrance is particularly busy, and the steps, built for a lesser population, are too narrow to accommodate the current usage. In fact, there's often a line of up to 25 commuters snaking back along the street, waiting their turn to enter the station. I'm not so sure this will help. Anyone who knows Broadway and Soho would be astounded at the applicant's prediction that only 3 persons per minute would be entering a retail store of more than 10,000 square feet during prime hours. And yet, here we have a proposal to allow oversized retail use and to move the enormous fan grating from the development site onto an inadequately expanded sidewalk. This grading will act as a serious impedance to pedestrian movement, particularly when the daily population of shoppers with a destination on the street increases from 0 to, well, thousands. Keep in mind that the site to the east, on the other side of Crosby Street, is also being developed right now for retail and office use. Also, a good many people will simply not want to be able to walk the grading, those with shoes with narrow heels, sort of sexist here, but with people with fear of heights, people with canes, and with walkers. And as you know, these gradings become quite slippery when icy or wet. Also, narrow Belgian block Crosby Street cannot accommodate loading and unloading of trucks supplying oversized retail establishments. Just half a paragraph left. Deliveries occur at night and are quite noisy, negatively impacting the quality of life. We see that with oversized, without a permit Bloomingdale's, and oversized, without a permit Topshop, who load and unload at night. This really creates quality of life issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tenenbaum. Mr. Knuckles.
So given your obvious experience in this neighborhood and familiarity with the site, Ms. Tenenbaum, what ideally do you think would be a better use for that site than what is proposed?
Well, personally, I
Yes.
would love to see affordable housing there.
No
But,
re- no
but we
reta-
can't go. Retail on the ground floor helps support it. Retail right now, a small space on I think it was Prince Street, just the ground floor retail just sold for $40 million. I think that from what we're seeing in this community, we're just being overwhelmed with the retail, the residential element of it. And my building is totally artist. Every floor has artist certified by the Department of Cultural Affairs. We still exist in Soho.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Tenenbaum. Toby Bergman.
Good morning, friends, commissioners. Toby Bergman, Community Board 2. I think I was very struck and very envious of the process that took place in Chelsea as compared to this one. It's, to me, very regrettable that a site as important as this one, it is the most important gateway to Soho. It's at a spectacular location because it's at the point where Houston Street curves and makes it a very, very visible site. And it's, as you know, across the street from a very famous, iconic sculpture, so representing Soho arts. So I think that at least, clearly, the contribution of this site to the finances of the MTA is important. But at least the opportunities of this site should have been evaluated with the participation of the community and the elected officials, and not just not just making it the only goal that was looked at was maximizing the income. And I think it's regrettable, and I think that everything that has occurred in terms of the development of the project goes back to that. I'm going to, we submitting an additional couple of statements, and I'm going to summarize them a little bit. We can accept the proposed 3-foot sidewalk widening as a minimum mitigation. It's much more difficult to accept the impact of retail loading from Crosby Street, a narrow mixed-use cobbled street. We think the loading on the narrow street is contrary to at least the spirit and intent of the requirements of 74-922. Multi-level retail stores exceeding 10,000 square feet have already transformed Broadway to the detriment of quality of residential uses. The expansion of this trend onto narrow streets of Soho should not be encouraged. If this application is approved, it should be for retail stores not exceeding 10,000 square feet and limited to the cellar and ground and second floors. We were told by the applicant that the reason why this building had to extend, the ventilation shafts had to be moved, was that to create efficiency of the floor plates. But now, as you were told today, and as we recognize looking at the plans, that in fact the floor plates that are now narrowing to 7 feet. So they've incorporated the part of the lot that narrows to nothing as a way of supposedly improving the efficiency of the floor plate. They're including the part of the building that has no efficiency for floor plates. And so the question is, which we asked them but didn't get a response to, is why the subway ventilation grates were not moved to the west, square off the building into a truly efficient floor plate, and then look into making it a little bit higher to make up the FAR. That was never brought to us as a sorry, I've used my time, so I'll take the rest in terms of questions.
First of all, good to see you, Mr. Bergman. So let me ask you the same question that Mr. Knuckles asked Ms. Tenenbaum, which is your first major objection to the use as opposed to the design and configuration of the use and the single retailer as opposed to double retailer, or is your objection more to the configuration? If not to the use, or if to the use, what would be the alternative?
Okay,
as you see it.
So as I said, I think it's regrettable that we didn't evaluate that. We didn't have a process to find those opportunities and figure out what the best use was. I don't know what the best use is, but I don't think anyone knows what the best use is. Retail is not a bad use for Broadway and Houston Street. I think that it's also a good thing that this corner is going to be developed. It's not, leaving it as in its current form is not what should happen. So I don't think the community board objects, or anyone on the community board objects to a development, to development there. And I think retail, if limited, would be okay. I don't see there's a trend in Soho towards larger and larger multi-floor retail. It's not a good trend, and each time we hear about how it's justified in terms of the previous ones, all the other ones around. And that's said to be the character of Soho, and therefore this is not disruptive of the character because it's imitating the character. But that's not the character of Soho. We know what the character of Soho is as one of the most special mixed-use landmark areas in the city and in the world. So we can't just look at huge retail and say, that's the character, that's what we should do.
Okay, so just to, if I can summarize what your position is, it's that you don't object to a ground floor retail use per se, it's the size of the retail use and the configuration and design here.
That's right.
And
the upper floors are as of right retail, but in the process of approving the below the second floor retail, you can also restrict how far up the building that goes. And we think it should not go, we agree with the borough president, it should not go above the second floor.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Bergman?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Terry Cude? Nice to see you again.
And you. Good morning, Chair Rice-Broad and Vice Chair Knuckles and Commissioners. When I was here in June to discuss 155 Mercer Street, I emphasized CB2's concern regarding the loss of Soho's mixed-use character and the spreading impact of large stores, including multi-floor and entire building retail stores. This application is a good time to begin to refine an approach to the problem. We think that the tools to slow this destructive trend are already in your toolbox, and some can be used effectively to improve the application we're discussing today. For example, 74922 application should not be approved with loading from narrow streets. That seems clear in the language itself. In this case, we do ask you to deny retail exceeding 10,000 square feet pursuant to 74922. 74712 applications can be rejected based upon the impact on the character of the surrounding area, including its balance of uses. This application is a visible starting point to begin the defense of the unique character of Soho, as Mr. Bergman referred to. This needs to be clearly differentiated from the character of retail mall. In other cases, 74711 approvals can include appropriate additional conditions and safeguards to enhance the character of the development and the buildings on the zoning lot. When allowing retail below the level of the second floor, you can at the same time restrict retail on upper floors, as Mr. Bergman commented. You can also, as appropriate, restrict eating and drinking establishments, limit the total square feet of retail, and impose restrictions on advertising and branding displays. 19 East Houston is a watershed application. The building, as proposed, will be a gleaming and glowing billboard at the most prominent Soho gateway. As a use of city land, it sends all the wrong messages, defining a new character for Soho for subsequent projects to refer to as justification for bigger stores with more branding than historic reference. You're hearing this concern today from CB2, from Soho residents, and from our local elected officials. This application exemplifies the challenge to Soho's mixed-use balance. Please deny it or fix it and send the message that the character of Soho will not be overwhelmed by large-scale retail stores. Thank Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Levin?
Yes, just to clarify for the record, are you speaking today on behalf of Community Board 2 or in some other capacity?
This is additional testimony from Community
From
Board
Community
2.
Board 2.
But based upon your questions from the last time I was here.
Yes, thank you. We've begun a conversation about this that I hope will continue. But I want to commend Board 2 on the somewhat nuanced position that you took on this application, recognizing that there's some features of some portions of the applications that are entirely appropriate and others that are problematic, and giving us a roadmap for picking between them. I think that's an appropriate and productive way to be approaching this. In your comments today, though, are you pulling back a little bit from the some of the findings, some of the recommendations of Board 2? I mean, the Board 2 application, the Board 2 letter, I think, was accepting of the application for retail use.
The Board 2 level was not accepting of retail use over 10,000 square feet.
That's the, yes, but the
we did not specifically object to
no, I know that.
retail
The
use.
74, I've got the number wrong, 711, 712A, the use permit you did not object to. It's just the size of the...
The size was our major objection. It's the large-scale retail. There are mom-and-pop stores in
Right,
Soho.
okay, thank you.
Ms. Del Toro?
Thank you for your testimony. Since I don't live too far from there, so I am concerned about the pedestrian congestion. However, the community board is saying that you're opposed to anything above 10,000 square feet. So you don't want one retailer. You're not opposed to more than two retailers. There have been some concern about the traffic impact if you have a destination store, a large store, and also the signage. In terms of your recommendation that you would be okay with two retailers, but not one, has the board done any kind of analysis? What do you think would be the impact of having two as opposed to one? What would be the impact in terms of the signage? What would be the impact in terms of the pedestrian traffic?
There was some discussion during our committee's meetings about overall size of retail broken up into multiple. There are different signage regulations depending. A large flagship store, the assumption I think we were working on is that when you've got a large flagship store, and in some of the brochures provided, not provided by, but that we were able to find that others will show you today, the idea that this is shown unlit and not at night. A flagship store that has just a branding opportunity for one could easily create really just a whole facade with repeated branding. And that is what we saw in some of the materials that the developer is using to market the facility. Whereas when you have smaller stores, you get a better diversity of retail. You get different populations, different size. You don't have perhaps as much of the loading and unloading. And we did discuss whether or not having one main door or multiple doors to multiple stores. At this point, I'd say that I'm not prepared to recommend what should be the exact size of each store, and there are different aspects that need to be balanced, one versus many. But the chances of one flagship store is really detrimental to Soho, and I think that's the main point in our resolution.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Jim Karras, is that?
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod, Vice Chair Knuckles, Commissioners. I'm Jim Karras, Director of Land Use and General Counsel, here on behalf of Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer in opposition to the application for a disposition of city-owned property and the 3 special permits for 19 East Houston Street. In concept, the Borough President supports the disposition of this property, which would provide the MTA much-needed revenue from what is currently an underutilized site. However, the Borough President cannot support the current proposal. The Borough President believes the applicant has proposed a well-designed building. but the potential of using this oddly configured site in a congested area for a single flagship large-scale retail store is likely to impair the essential character of and have had adverse effects on the surrounding area. The Borough President believes that the process by which this development program was selected failed to take into account community priorities for the area or the unique challenges of this particular site. The most significant concern is the request for a large retail establishment. Such large retail establishments require a special permit because they take up large portions of building frontage, challenging the character of the neighborhoods, and because they have potentially unique impacts due to vehicular and pedestrian traffic and merchandise loading. While recognizing that the area has evolved into a retail destination and that more frequently larger national and international retail chains are locating along Broadway, the Borough President does not believe that this is an appropriate goal for every site in the area that can be made to accommodate such a use. This is even more the case at this site, which is small, oddly shaped, with a narrower, congested sidewalk than that adjacent to many of the other flagship stores in the vicinity and containing an entrance to a busy subway station. Additionally, the Borough President believes that Community Board 2's concerns in regards to the lighting, signage, and sidewalk width must be addressed before this project can move forward. We understand that DOT has approved a 3-foot sidewalk widening of the sidewalk on Houston Street and are appreciative of that. Though the proposed bulk modifications and retail use are appropriate for the neighborhood, it is difficult to separate these actions from a disposition which proposes use of city-owned land in a way that is not beneficial to the public. At this site, a retail establishment of the size proposed is inappropriate. The size of the retail facility should be reduced and should include at least 2 stores to promote a vibrant retail mixture in the neighborhood and ameliorate the negative impacts on the area that would come from large-scale retail. I believe the conclusion in our resolution is at least 2 stores and 2 floors. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Karras. Questions? Thank you very much. Martin Lawrence. Why don't you hand it in? What? I don't think so. You hand it in?
These are, I'm just going to give a number of statements that people gave me to turn in.
Okay.
Where they're there.
Thank you. Peter Davies.
I have multiple copies. I also have, this is from some neighbors, a letter. And I have a couple of boards that I would like to put up before I...
Bring your own boards. Very helpful.
Mr. Davies, can you move them down this way so that those folks can see them?
Thank you. Make sure you see.
More coming. Or you've got another one for us?
I got another
Okay.
Hopefully they won't fall. Good afternoon. My name is Pete Davies. I'm a 34-year resident of Broadway and Soho. The 19 East Houston Street plan is out of character with a mixed-use Soho neighborhood. The development as proposed brings with it numerous problems which together outweigh any community benefit. If this plan is properly considered for approval, it will be shown that changes must be implemented, such as the very thoughtful points outlined in the recommendation to deny from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer and the unanimous resolution in opposition from Community Board 2. Today I will focus on the problems inherent in the developer's proposal for oversized retail and the ill-advised plan to use this building as a branding and advertising opportunity. I have provided images to help you better understand what is being planned for 19 East Houston Street. Our local community is in agreement. Overwhelming interior illuminated signage is completely out of character with the nearby neighborhoods of Soho, NoHo, and the South Village, all of which will be negatively impacted by this plan. The prominence of the site and inappropriate illumination and signage. 19 East Houston Street sits at the southeast corner of Broadway and Houston Street It's a key northern entry point to Soho where Houston bends to the northeast, creating a prominence that is visible all the way west to 6th Avenue and beyond. That high visibility is the real value that this developer wants to cash in on, seeking to maximize return by creating an illuminated branding opportunity. Their proposal is for a glass enclosed channel 30 feet wide and rising the full height of what I hear now is a 98-foot building, where a retailer can basically force-feed advertising onto passersby and the nearby neighborhoods. Our community's fears were made real when the developer posted online marketing materials for 19 East Houston Street building, which labeled the site 606 Broadway and showed a fully illuminated facade rising above Houston Street, chock-a-block full of overwhelming lighting and imagery declaring high visibility over 200 feet of Soho frontage. The development team has since tried to distance itself from these designs, as has the architect for 19 East Houston Street. But the truth is found in an interview published in the architect's newsletter in April 2004, where the architect states, quote, "The value of this property is not so much in floor plans and square footage, it's in the location more than anything else. It's about visibility and who would want to be there." The article goes on to clarify the developer's intent. For those of you wondering, what will be done with the thin edge of the wedge space at the corner of Broadway? It will be left empty, a soaring atrium from the second floor up, giving whatever retail tenant that takes the space a highly visible branding opportunity. Whatever piece of advertising fills this space, it will show through the glass facade to the bustling throng entering Soho from the village.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I'm not sure whose testimony you were giving there. I assume...
What?
No. I just, since you were reading from the developer's
describing that this was an advertising building.
Questions? Mr.
There will be further speakers in favor?
Yes. Any, Mr. Davies, just one.
Yes.
You were reading from something that you cited as being dated in 2004. I assume you meant 2014.
Oh, I thought I said 2014.
Okay, just wanted to correct the record. Mr. Reade.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Just have a quick question for you. I'm assuming
Sure.
you're showing this as an example of the negative aspects of this facade and this
Yes.
project in the neighborhood. How would it change if it were broken up? I mean, obviously the third floor would not be retail, but how would it look different if it were only 2 floors of retail?
Well, okay, the 2-floor retail is how it would look different.
Yeah, how is this
Right
a
now,
more
it's
negative project
designed for, well, this is, it seems that this imagery, you could ask them, it's their imagery, is for a continuous flagship style one retailer store. The impact also of smaller retail, I live above a very large retail, the loading for oversized retail, the amount of stuff and the hours that goes on is quite more extensive than it is for a smaller store.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Davies? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Davies. We'll switch back now to those in favor. Jonathan Ratner.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Ratner of Madison Capital, the developer of the site. Madison is a New York-based commercial real estate company with properties in several neighborhoods in the city, including Soho. We began working on the RFP for 19 East Houston Street in April of 2012. After 12 months of study, analysis, and coordination and negotiation, we were awarded the site in April of 2013. In the 15 months since award, we've worked closely with the MTA, EDC, DOT, the Landmarks Preservation Commission, City Planning, Community Board 2, the Manhattan Borough President's Office, and other stakeholders to create a viable, thoughtful, and architecturally significant project on this important intersection of New York. At 31,000 square feet total and only 4,500 square feet of ground floor retail space, the project is very small relative to its neighbors. For example, the ground floor of Hollister next door is 10,000 feet, and the entire store contains 40,000 square feet of retail. The BP gas station site across the street is going to have 9,000 square feet of ground floor space and 27,000 square feet of retail. This site only has 4,500 square feet on grade and a maximum of 15,000 square feet across floors 1 through 3. Thus, we will likely not be able to attract such large flagship tenants that occupy the neighboring buildings that require more space. In addition to the small size, the development faces many challenges, including the irregular lot shape, which limits the depth of the building as it approaches Broadway, existing easements at grade and the ventilation shaft below, and coordination with the existing subway station. Despite these conditions, the location dynamics of the site provide for an interesting and exciting project that we look forward to developing. Throughout the development process, we've carefully listened to concerns and worked to address issues regarding the project. We responded to aesthetic and lighting concerns raised by the community and landmarks by fully redesigning the Crosby and Houston Street facades, which resulted in a certificate of appropriateness for the building. We also addressed CB2's concern regarding loading and the sidewalk width by working with DOT, MTA, and CB2 to maximize the sidewalk extension and design the loading area in conjunction with community input. Further, as part of our RFP submission, we included a subway stair widening project for the entrance at Houston and Broadway that will significantly benefit subway riders and the community. In addition to these benefits, the overall project stands to provide needed financial support for the MTA, create new construction and permanent jobs, and replace an underutilized site with a contextual building that will provide high-quality office and retail space to Soho. We appreciate the efforts put forth by all parties involved in reviewing the project and look forward to continuing to work together as development progresses. I've also put forth the updated ground floor retail plan, or the entire ground floor plan, which is going to be submitted to you subsequent to the hearing, which shows the new layout. And as you can see, the office lobby entrance is direct off Crosby Street. There's no longer a freight entrance area. The retail elevator is accessed through the interior of the retail space.
Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ratner. Questions? Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Ratner, listening to presentations from your side and the community, and looking at this building, I have a concern. First thing I noticed when I opened my packet was a small New York Times building. Okay, the one that used to be the New York Times on the corner of 42nd, the Wedge, which is now one huge billboard. Okay, a very, very profitable billboard.
I think he's talking about the New York Times Tower on
Right.
Crossroads.
Yeah.
In Times Square.
At the end of the day, the developer found out much more return because of the signage than it would have been as an occupancy. You have a building that's going to be retail for at least 3 floors, maybe 4. Incorrect?
The cellar 1, 2, and 3 is what we're proposing.
Okay.
The cellar is minimal, approximately 2,000 square feet.
Retail has no consuming need for windows. You got windows. The answer to the earlier question with regard to signage was based upon exterior signage. I do not know whether we have any control over interior signage at all. That would be through the window. So it's not too hard to understand the community's concern about this flagship being indeed a billboard. Going back to the point, which has no function, there was the reference to storage. Whether it be storage or not, I don't know. That cries to be the prow of the billboards, whether it's inside or outside the building. What assurances can you give the community that you won't billboard this building from the inside?
Well, we're going to be subject to all regulations, including zoning landmarks. And just to step back, when we initially put forth a design for landmarks, we took feedback from the community as well as from the commission and redesigned the facade. Crosby is a brick facade with punch windows, which is completely in line with the other buildings on Crosby. And then the Houston facade was designed with a specific algorithm that includes structural and architectural elements. So I know that there's concern with regards to the overall visibility, and we've worked to address those concerns within the design, and we achieved an appropriate certificate from Landmarks in response to the changes that we made. We'll also be subject to all these regulations.
I'm not sure if you responded to this question.
Yeah.
What assurance can we give the community that at the end of the day, this building does not become an interior lit sign?
We haven't leased the building, so we can't attest to exactly what is going to be displayed within the building. But we're going to be subject to all regulations, and any retailer that's going to be occupying the building is going to have a specific plan that is going to have fixturing and merchandising. Now, if there's concerns raised by the community, as we've done with other projects in the past, we're happy to address and listen to those concerns. But as far as attesting to exactly what that specific retailer's plan is at this point, we haven't leased the property.
Mr. Chairman, is there any regulations that would govern the opportunity or the ability for a user to inboard light a building, any building?
Well, I think you heard the colloquy between Ms. Levin and Mr. Johnson that there are regulations regarding advertising, I believe, within 18 inches of the window, but nothing beyond that, as I recall. And we will confirm that and let the commission know specifically what those regulations
With
are.
regard to the crowd, I don't know the area of the crowd, but, and I don't know the absolute area needs of the MTA with regard to the grills, these sidewalk grills. But has anyone determined whether the ability to put the air at the prow would be sufficient in lieu of the both sidewalk widening and replacement of the grills?
We did analyze that and determined that because of the location of the existing subway stair, we couldn't route it through that area.
Aren't you revising that subway stair?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that going to be rebuilt?
It's going to be widened, but it exists today and it's going to become bigger. Because the grate is, or the existing shaft comes up to the east of where the stair is. In order to send it through the prow, it would have to go through the stair area.
You can't go under it now?
It doesn't go down that far. So you would have to go into a condition that just can't be achieved.
Mr. Eady.
Thank you. Actually, my question was similar to Irwin's regarding the subway vent, but might not, and I don't know the legal ramifications here, but might not there be the possibility of rerouting it under the city street for the MTA? I don't know if that's been looked into.
You mean bring it out to the street?
No, on the sidewalk, I mean, I'm sorry. You were saying the grading.
It exists here now.
Oh, it exists there. It's in the back of the building. Okay. Right, and to the degree that you can't bring it to the prow, to the corner there.
Yes.
Because of the stair, could you route it on this, I don't know what's under the sidewalk there, but.
We've analyzed going east, we've analyzed going west, we've analyzed trying.
But even going off your property, in terms of the city street, you've looked at it?
We've looked at all of it. We've looked at every aspect, and this is what was included.
Okay.
Mr. Ratner, the promotional material that Peter Davies just showed us, and as I recall, came sometime in 2014 after you received your certificate of appropriateness from Landmarks. So I gather you've now, from what he said, withdrawn that promotional material, but presumably your view is that was consistent with the certificate of appropriateness?
Yes, our position is that the promotional materials, well, let me just back up for a second. We're going to be constructing the building in accordance with the certificate of appropriateness. The promotional materials that were issued took certain liberties that made the building appear more dramatic and the lighting set in a certain way that really exaggerated the visuals inside the building. It's more animation than architectural rendering.
But
so we understand the
consistent,
concerns.
consistent, I assume, in your view with the
There were certain liberties
previously
taken in that
granted
rendering.
certificate of appropriateness.
We're going to be constructing the building in accordance with the certificate of appropriateness. There are certain aspects of the rendering that don't consider certain structural elements of the building, effects of lighting from interior shadows being created by fixtures, the effects of the buildings on the north side of the street and how that's going to affect shadowing and lighting within the intersection. So the artistic rendering was really just that. It was more artistic than it was intended to be a full representation of the architectural elements on the facade of the building.
Ms. Deleuze.
Mr. Ratner, I'm just wondering, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but in the artistic rendering, it was interesting to note that there was no signage depicted for the MTA entrance. Are you familiar with what signage requirements there are for the MTA entrance that will be part of the property?
Yes, we are, and we're in the process of designing the entire subway area with MTA, and we've been working on that for a number of months.
Okay. All right, and can you just update us on what your conversations are right now with potential retail tenants?
We've been marketing to a variety of tenants. Obviously, the delivery of the site is a couple of years out, but we've been talking with tenants in different industries, either fashion or technology or different uses. But anyone that is going to be interested in this site, unfortunately, as discussed, the maximum of 14,500 square feet of retail wouldn't constitute a flagship in the sense of a lot of the other stores in Soho. For example, Hollister's 40,000 feet, Uniqlo has close to 40,000 feet, Crate and Barrel across the street is 36,000 feet, Adidas has 36,000 feet, the BP gas station site's going to have 27,000 feet. So we have a 4,500 square foot plate. So we're not going to be able to attract those tenants. So the tenants that we'd be attracting would be probably tenants that would fit into the program that this building can offer. And it'll be consistent with other uses in Soho.
And would it be consistent then that, considering those tenants would only need a smaller floor plate anyway, that the request from the community board and the borough president that it be divided up to at least 2 retail tenants would still help you meet your needs?
Well, we've obviously looked at the ability to break up the space, and we appreciate the feedback from the borough president and the community. And when we looked at it, if you were going to break up just the ground floor to 2 tenants, say you put a dividing line here, this tenant's not going to have access to the basement because the ventilation shaft is below it. They're also not going to have access to the upper floors. Therefore, this tenant's going to need to stock on the ground. They're also going to need to have a bathroom on the ground. So you lose a lot of usable. This tenant is going to have access to the upper floors, and they're going to have a staircase in this area, which is basically going to decrease a lot of the usable space in this area. We're already very space constrained. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about how huge this impact is going to be. 4,500 feet, we don't believe is going to have a huge impact, whether it's 1 store or 2 stores. You can argue that multiple stores would have a more dramatic impact on pedestrian and on the loading situation, because you're going to have loading for multiple stores, and you're going to have pedestrians going to multiple stores. But we've definitely looked at it, and we've looked at it from perspectives of the community as well as from a financial perspective. And the conclusion is, considering the constraints of the site, and the fact that it becomes very shallow as you approach Broadway, demising it is just not warranted on this lot.
I understand it's definitely an oddly shaped lot, no question about it. But I guess my question is, are you in discussions with retail tenants who might be willing to take a smaller retail space?
And we don't have active discussions with specific tenants right now. We have had some inquiries. We will evaluate tenants that are interested in smaller spaces and determine whether they work for the site or not. As of right now, what we're applying for and what we think is appropriate would be for 1 tenant, considering the challenges of demising the space.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marin.
Mr. Ratner, good afternoon, and thank you for your testimony. My question was going to be along the lines of what type of tenant is it that you foresee going into the space? The community is concerned about large retail tenants. You have a smaller square footage than all of the other stores you've mentioned. So who do you foresee as a retail tenant fitting into this space? You've had some inquiries, so just a curiosity as to...
Yeah, tenants that are commensurate with uses in Soho. I mean, the corners around us are Hollister, American Eagle, Crate and Barrel, Adidas. those are the four corners. You know, within Soho, you have a number of retailers, whether they're fashion tenants or technology tenants. We can't do food or drinking on the ground floor per the zoning. So the tenants that are indicative of the market is who we anticipate will be interested in this site.
You mentioned some inquiries. Can you share with us who those inquiries were?
Nothing substantive enough to be able to state publicly.
Ms. Levin.
Actually, I have another question, but just continuing in that vein, is there a separate market for the commercial space above, or are you really looking at this as the office space would support whoever ends up there as a retailer?
Well, a single tenant occupying the retail and the office is very rare. We would obviously discuss that option if there were a tenant that wanted to utilize both retail and office, as they do in many other buildings throughout the city. But we're fully prepared to lease the office space to different tenants than the retail.
Okay. Then returning to the much more mundane, I'd like to ask you about the subway, the configuration of the subway entrance and how you decided on the amount of space that you're providing there for pedestrians going in and out.
You're talking about the landing
Yes.
outside of the subway? It's really a function, and I would probably want to defer to Naveed and the designers, but it was designed really in conjunction with the area of the building that we would be exiting, and also the current existing platform area, which is, I think, I would have to look at it specifically. But right now, there is some obstructions coming out of the subway. We did rotate the stair in order to create a better loading area and also free up this congestion right here, right behind the stair, parallel with the sidewalk. By rotating it, we could see better, a more fluid condition.
Okay. The entry that's shown just opposite the stair, that's an emergency exit?
Here?
Yes.
Correct. That's a fire exit.
So unlikely to be used?
Yes.
Not in active use?
Hopefully not.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Ratner? Thank you. Greg Jalisco.
Hi, I'm with AKRF, the environmental consultant. I'm just here to answer any questions on the EAS, if you have any.
Ms. Delos.
Well, can you speak to what the pedestrian capacity is now on the sidewalk and how an expansion of 3 feet will assist?
The EAS didn't get into the level of service currently on the sidewalk. What we did was a level 1 screening analysis that showed that the number of trips that would be associated with the project would be below the level requiring further analysis, so we didn't get into that kind of level of service analysis.
And that was mostly based on the fact that the square footage of the retail space is the size that it is?
Correct.
Okay. And did you all look at the landing issue that Commissioner Levin on the MTA stairwell as well, or not so much?
Not so much. Again, since we just kept it to a level 1 analysis, we didn't take into account either the grading or the expansion of the sidewalk or the expansion of the stairway.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Levin.
Do you happen to know what the current level of service is for that stair?
I do not. I know that there was a DOT study of the area in 2010 or 2011 that found that I don't know if it looked at the stairway, but it looked at the intersections in the area, and they were generally a level of service B.
Can you repeat that last part? I'm sorry. They were generally?
Level of service B, LOSB.
Okay.
Which is not bad.
Not bad, okay.
Right.
Okay. B, okay.
I realized that a detailed analysis was not necessary because the size of the space fell below the threshold of detailed analysis. But in your expert opinion, would there be a significant difference if in pedestrian activity if there were 2 retail stores as opposed to 1 retail store?
I wouldn't want to overly speculate, but I wouldn't imagine it would be dramatically different. In either case, you have an overall square footage of retail use. So,
And that would, in your view, be more of a determinant than whether or not there were multiple retail uses or just one?
I would have to get back to you with a more precise answer, but I think that that's right.
Thank you. Ms. Del Toro.
Let me just ask you, the traffic congestion is, as you said, is based on the square footage. So, but being very familiar with Soho, a lot of businesses there, the traffic is depending on the type of retail.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Apple, sometimes the line goes around the block for people getting in.
Yeah.
So, and it happens with some other stores that are very popular. So how will we avoid that in a place like this?
Given that we don't know the type of retail, the exact type of retail that would occupy the space, we use a generic transportation demand factor for destination retail. So in theory, that captures the type of destination retail that you're talking about, and it's a factor that's frequently used in these kind of analyses and was reviewed by the DOT as part of the review of the EAS.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Jalisco? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse Mazer? No? Mark Simon?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mark Simon. I'm an artist and a licensed architect in New York State. For more than the past 2 decades, I've made my living practicing commercial real estate in New York City. I've been very active in Soho, completing many retail and commercial transactions in the neighborhood. My office for the last 12 years is basically 1 block from this site, and I pass it on a daily basis and use it almost as often. In addition, I've had the pleasure of knowing the developer of this project for many years and have represented them on other of their properties. I well know and respect their creativity, their sensitivity, and their appreciation of true quality. I wish to speak strongly in favor of the project. The site represents many challenges that you've heard about this morning, including its location, its shape, its relationship to a major transportation node. Any developer working with such challenges also faces the responsibility of working in this amazing and vibrant neighborhood. That being said, I sincerely believe that this design represents a beautiful and intelligent solution to the challenges while meeting the responsibility of working with this important site. An unattractive and underutilized property will have a new, remarkable building whose design is sensitive to the context and will bring appropriate new use to the prominent location. The scale and the materials are modern, yet they allude to the history of the location in a creative and unique way. The building will be an intriguing complement as a gateway to Soho with the art wall of its neighbor across the street at 599 Broadway. The improvement of access to the MTA subway station is sorely needed, and it'll benefit all that use it. The new retail and office users that the building will attract will be exactly in line with what makes Soho a vibrant and lasting location. Many years ago, I had the pleasure of studying with Chester Rapkin. His 1962 study is widely credited with saving Soho from destruction, and in fact, he gave Soho its name. He also had the opportunity on occasions to sit where you do. I like to think that he would approve of this project, and I hope that you will recognize its merits and do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Questions? Mr. Cantor.
You said you were an architect, so I have a question.
Yes.
What I refer to as the crowd is like about 60 foot long. It's a void space. Aside from the aesthetics of getting to the corner, what function would that space have?
Well, it's a really unique and very, very difficult to utilize site. It's not simply a building that's shaped like a triangle, for instance, the Flatiron Building. This building has only one exposure at that point, and it literally comes to a point. combining with that the location of the access to the MTA below and the physics of dealing with the substructure, which is predominantly MTA, means that the developer was enormously constrained, and I have to credit them and the architect for coming up with such a solution as they did. It's very, very difficult to imagine how to utilize something like that, and I think that what they achieved is quite appropriate. The structure is a reference to the way the indigenous buildings in Soho developed. It shows the spandrels, the steel of the skeleton that supports the building, as well as the glass that'll have either office users or retail behind it. And
Got a 60-foot run of blackness.
well, it won't be black. There'll be some kind of visibility and illumination. And what I perceive every day as I use that site is literally a black hole. It's a black hole filled with black drums. It has vehicles from the MTA, and it has the dark side of the side exposure, lot line exposure of the adjacent properties. So in virtually every way, it'll be a much more engaging, much more interesting way to approach Soho. And I think that what they achieved is far, far more beneficial than people imagine.
I'm not challenging the fact that we're doing something there, but I'm just looking at four-story building, trowel, with no occupancy, no usage, which to me cries out to have a sign in it.
It'll have to have some kind of life, and sometimes in architecture, the space that's made by a void is just as strong and important as a space made by a solid. And I think that the way that it's configured here achieves that. And definitely it'll bring people's focus to the subway entrance below, which is something that I think one will really appreciate when it's there. Anything that brings your eye and sort of awareness to that whole slot of space is going to direct you to the subway.
I guess that's why you're an architect and I'm an engineer.
And, you know, also, I'm wearing a few hats here. I work in Soho. I pass this daily. And I've done many of the transactions. And something interesting to point out here in terms of the scale of this project, and this might obliquely answer some of the questions that were posed in terms of the real estate, is that in all likelihood, this will attract a slightly different character of retailer and probably a higher end caliber of retailer than you imagine, because it's smaller, because it's more constrained. And as Jonathan Ratner pointed out, combinations of retail and office are unusual. I've done a couple of those transactions with, for instance, Jill Sander in Soho, where their retail is on the ground and their office is upstairs. But those tenants are very few and far between. More likely, there'll be one retail tenant downstairs on the lower three levels in the cellar level, and other creative uses, commercial uses for the offices above.
Ms. Battaglia.
I realize you're not the architect for this project, and I certainly understand traveling past blighted areas that you like to see developed, and you've been pretty articulate in your opinions and the information you've provided us. My question to you is, in your professional opinion, I understand that the square footage here is not as ample as that of Crate and Barrel across the
Correct.
way. But do you think, based on the footprint and the configuration, that it could be subdivided?
You know, there's certainly the possibility of drawing a line.
I myself have figured out a line, but
I mean, it's easy.
I'm not the designer.
No, I'll tell you, it's very simple to draw a line on this ground floor plane, and in the abstract, if you isolate only that, it makes a certain degree of sense, but it doesn't in terms of looking at the project as a whole. In other words, utilizing the second floor is always an issue for retail in New York. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the second floor or the second and the third floor in this case, bottom line is a lot of shoppers in New York are lazy. In order to invite them up to an upper level, it has to be a very special and very attractive use. Something that was spoken to previously by both the architect and the developer, let me address that. By both the architect and the developer, is the fact that you need the stair. The stair is an enormous user of space. If you had 2 retail tenants that needed to use the upper floors, the amount of elements that you'd have to duplicate would render it totally unusable. I wouldn't be able to lease it to anyone of that sort. It would make the ground floor basically simply a staircase access to upper level retail, and that would lower the value of the project and make it infeasible.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon. Artie Adasco? Artie, I think there's just a couple of questions that were directed to EDC.
Do you want to say something?
Of course. You're entitled.
My name is Hardy Adasco, Senior Vice President for Planning at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. I want to say a few words about the project and am prepared to answer some questions. I'd like to correct a few impressions or tendencies in this conversation that I think need correcting. It was about 46 years ago next week that in my planning internship I surveyed industrial businesses in Soho, working for Harvey Schultz, and so coming full circle to this is interesting.
I thought you were going to say you started at EDC, Hardy.
It was before PDC was founded. I was working for the Department of City Planning, or technically Robert B. Mitchell Consultant. This is really an important part of an important initiative. Getting agencies to reconsider and make more efficient their space and consolidate and rationalize it is a challenge, and it's a challenge that this administration is going to be doing with an even greater vengeance. And the MTA and the city worked out an arrangement. We have approximately 7 properties in the pipeline. 1 was approved by the Planning Commission. Another is having a scoping meeting next month, and 4 are still in the RFP process, where the MTA has identified sites that they can consolidate and free up the land for jobs and taxes and other uses, and receive the revenue for the capital program that needs funding, mostly from the city these days, or from the riders, but preferably so. So this is a way to accomplish those, and so the result will be a use of the site other than parking and other than a monthly fruit stand, which, from my personal observation, probably interferes with the efficient use of the sidewalk by pedestrians more than any store will or in the future. And so we'll get a project with 125 construction jobs, 90 permanent jobs. Those are estimates based on the size. They're not guarantees or promises, and they're not dependent on exactly who the tenant is or is not. And we think that's very important. It's been reviewed by the Landmarks Commission. It's been approved by the Landmarks Commission. The Community Board approved it before it went to the Landmarks Commission. Without intending to intentionally disparage another profession, marketing brochures for real estate projects are not the criteria. It will be governed by the Landmarks Certificate of Appropriateness, the zoning regulations, and of course any conditions that the Commission feels appropriate to put on the grant of a special permit, and that language is fairly unencumbered. We also get a substantially widened subway stair that in the MTA's own reconstruction of the station, they didn't have room to fund and do. And so we get great improvement in the subway access.
Thank you, Hardy. Questions? Ms. Delos.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for being here. So you mentioned, obviously, that EDC is obviously going to be doing this many more RFPs to kind of maximize use of space. And considering some of the comments that we've heard from the community board about the community's involvement in establishing the criteria for the RFP, I don't know if it's too soon for EDC to speak to how that might be different under this administration moving forward with RFPs, because it does seem as though there were some missed opportunities to to engage in some conversation when this RFP was issued?
Well, it's certainly too soon in terms of specific to this administration, but in engaging outsiders who are not bound by the laws of confidentiality and other and outside agencies even in constructing an RFP, it's always a very delicate balance between trying to preserve a level playing field that opens up when the RFP is issued and does not have information sneaking out all over the place, and actually, after responses are submitted, does not have it turn into a beauty contest of people reaching out to communities and community organizations to support their project independent of what the reviewers would consider the merits and the selection criteria. So it's a delicate one that we generally try to do in generalities, both after the RFP is submitted and in constructing it, but without setting it up so that the information sneaks out.
Just as a follow-up to that, you know, having been involved in the community and the community-led process, I would say that you have a sister agency at HPD that has struck that delicate balance on a number of RFPs that they've issued in the city in terms of engaging community, broadly speaking in terms of principles, broadly speaking in terms of goals of an RFP, and even involving the community in a review process absent in maintaining confidentiality and absent any information about who the applicants are. So it might be something that you can take back to EDC.
We have worked with HPD on many of these.
I know, right. But so the other question I had really goes back to this, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask. I spoke, you know, asked the question of Mr. Chan. Is there any concern about how the issue of the grates was handled in this particular situation, given the fact that there were some potential respondents who were kind of turned away as a response?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the things I wanted to clarify. We set up the RFP, and we wanted to make it clear that the MTA's, the transit authority's need for ventilation was primary, and that was not going to, and that developers' idea of showing us fancy stuff that might not be feasible, the equation was going to be reversed, and that their technical needs were going to be the priority. The responses we got, the less than a dozen responses, had ventilation solutions all over the place, and that did not become the choice criteria for who we continued negotiations with. We did not veto respondents because they moved the ventilation. And there were a variety of solutions. And when we finally selected this proposal, they then have spent the last 10 months working with the technicians at the Transit Authority in terms of a feasible relocation, because the ventilation, the issue is going all the way up, and the need to do that and taking a lot of square footage and dividing up the space in order for the vertical. This solution could not be at the Broadway corner because it relates to the smoke fan room, and so it had to be proximate to that, not just someplace that looked nice on a site plan, but didn't relate technically. So their criteria, after we had selected the project, the developer was not guaranteed that the Transit Authority would approve his proposed relocation plan. And I suppose technically, if during design development something falls out of bed, he's stuck and has to find a different solution, even going forward from today. So it was not the criteria. I'd also point out that, actually partially in response to a question that you phrased, it was not an auction. It was not the highest price. There were a variety of selection criteria, and one of the very important ones was the experience and skill of the developer, and so it was not a highest bid situation. It was a combination of a variety of factors that led to the choice of this selection.
Thank you.
Ms. Battaglia?
Mr. Udasco's response addressed my concern. Thank you.
Ms. Levin.
I was just actually going to ask, as you were in the middle of that question, you got partly to the answer. What were the selection criteria in the, what did you ask for in the RFP, and was retail highlighted?
I'm
Or is that just
remembering that less well than the 46 years ago.
Welcome to the party.
But price was important. The design issues were important. The experience of the developer was important. And I'm looking for my backup.
Relocation of trucks.
Trucks.
Right.
Trucks, relocation.
And the relocation of the trucks, where they were going, where the transit facilities, and that was covered.
Okay, so the RFP was silent as to use?
It was basically zoning.
Zoning.
And insofar as the zoning allowed special permit, discretionary special permits, that's also allowed, as opposed to a rezoning.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Udasco? Thank you very much, Hardy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, going back to those in opposition, Dr. Shlomo Angel? Is it Angel? What? Angel?
We'll find out.
This could be Angel. Am I pronouncing your name right? Yes.
Chairman, sorry?
Was I pronouncing your name right?
Yes. My name is Shlomo Angel. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for giving me the floor. I'm a resident of 284 Lafayette Street, a stone's throw from the proposed project, and I'm also an adjunct professor of urban planning at New York University, and I write about planning and about architecture. And one of the lessons that I have been able to distill from my a few decades of experience in this field is that urban development is a series of acts of repair. So the idea is when we have a new project and we look at how it fits into the new place, that it would be something that repairs the environment. It makes it a better place than it was before. And that project has the potential for doing that. I mean, having retail on the ground floor is a lot better than having a parking lot with trucks. And we, as a community, we welcome that. I want to focus my comments simply on the sidewalk. We just heard that there was a discussion between the MTA and the developer how to solve the problem of the grade. Okay, they solved it, but they solved it at our expense. We had a 12-foot sidewalk, not a very nice one, but we had a 12-foot sidewalk. Now we have a 4-foot grate on that sidewalk that is 100-foot long, and we know that these grates are not as good as sidewalks because high-heeled women find it difficult to navigate, they're slippery during the snowstorms, and the handicapped find it difficult to negotiate. There is a possibility, and the DOT is getting there, of widening the sidewalk. And we now hear that it's widening the sidewalk by 3 feet. What I would like to point out to you is that is not enough, because the grade is 4 feet. We had 12 feet. We're still going to be 1 foot short. Now, luckily, as you see on this drawing, this lane, this first traffic lane of Houston, is not really a through lane. It is a very little used traffic lane. There's a 1 bus stop there, and there's a bus stopping there every 20 minutes. This is why the DOT has agreed to move the sidewalk 3 feet. But that 3 feet, I claim, is a relatively arbitrary number, because I don't think it's a full lane and it's not half a lane. So I don't see why, and this is what I would urge you to consider, requiring the widening of the sidewalk by 6 feet. rather than by 3 feet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Just a comment, I'd be interested to hear what the MTA has to say in response to your comments.
DOT.
I'm sorry, DOT.
Yeah, nobody here from.
We have no one here from DOT, but we will try to elicit a comment from DOT. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Matt Borden? Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you, Chairman Weisbrod, and all the commissioners. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the commissioners. I feel like I represent Assemblymember Deborah Glick, and I think a lot of the questions that have already been asked are really getting at the heart of what a lot of the concerns in the community are, which you've heard. I'm not going to bore everyone with a retelling of the stories that you've known, but just in brief, it seems that this project's too glassy, too flashy, and it's only going to add unbearable congestion to the surrounding blocks. It's glassy because the developer, as we've heard, is keen on having the building pretty much serve as a giant billboard, something that we don't need. And it's flashy because they want to have a destination retail with no limits on square footage. Now, I've been in this business long enough to know that anytime a developer tells you there's absolutely no way possibly you can do something, that sometimes you need to relook at that, because there always, whenever there's a will, there's always a way. And I do believe that, as many folks here have already gotten to, that if you could have 2 retail spaces, that would be preferable. And if that meant a slight redesign of the structure, then it could probably happen. And also, and I think as many people have talked about already, the subway ventilation is a concern. It is a deal. The fact that it is going to stretch for as far as it will be, that you're increasing the side of the sidewalk, but ultimately you're losing out in the end because the width of the subway grate is actually less than what you're getting from the sidewalk. It doesn't ultimately seem like it's going to be a benefit to the community. And then finally, public benefit of the sale, which we understand the money is very well needed, but it can't be gained at the expense of neighborhood character. And I think ultimately that the commissioners, you guys are asking all the right questions, and I know that the community has really spent a lot of time on this. There's been a lot of concerns about this project. Some of the things that EDC talked about in terms of with the MTA and the ventilation, there are a lot of sort of questions that have sort of yet to be really fully answered. I don't know if we will have those answers, but I know the community has a lot of concerns, as does the Manhattan Borough President. And I believe Mr. Chan earlier talked about the elected officials wanting to be in favor of having a project that raised a lot of money. Certainly was none of the local elected officials. It certainly wasn't the assembly member, the state senator, or the local council member. I don't know who that person was referring to. And also I can tell you for a fact that the community board did not approve it before it went to landmarks. It was not approved by the community board, although it was approved by landmarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Thank you very much. Renee Monrose.
Hi. My name is Renee Monrose, and I'm a longstanding resident of 542 Broadway between Prince and Spring, which, if you know Soho, is sort of the bullseye of retail in that area. So I'm acutely aware of the problems on a daily basis that have been raised here in terms of pedestrian traffic and noise from loading and unloading. And given, even in spite of what the developer and architects have said today, I just want to express my skepticism about their reassurances on those matters. I live next door to Uniqlo, which granted is a larger retail, but it's a single retail, and we are awakened several times a week by the loading and unloading in the middle of the night. And my sidewalk is impassable on shopping days, big shopping days, so that pedestrians walk in the middle of, or in the traffic lanes of Broadway, which is very dangerous. And I suspect the same thing would end up happening here on Houston. Anyway, I really appreciate the seriousness with which you all are considering these issues, so I thank you. One other matter that's never been raised, and is a personal one that I'm concerned with, is no one has ever discussed sustainability or green building practices. And I would hope that a new development, those things would matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Georgette Fleischer?
Hi, Georgette Fleischer. I'm a resident of the area. I'm also the founder and president of Friends of Petrosino Square. And I'd like to actually pick up on a question that was raised by Vice Chairman Knuckles earlier. As the founder of Friends of Petrosino Square, I was one of 3 community groups, also the Broadway Residents Coalition that Pete Davies is the head of, and the Soho Alliance, who were approached by one of the almost dozen alternate proposals for this particular space. This was the proposal that was put forward by Larga Vista. I want to say that it is possible for a developer to reach out to members of the community at the initial stages of a project like this, to work with the community and come up with a plan that is really congenial for all of us. The other thing that I'd like to say about the Larga Vista project is that it strikes me, after hearing the discussion today, that the aesthetic and purpose of that project is exactly opposite of what the purpose of the project here is. It turned out not to be entirely feasible, so it would have had to have been adjusted. But the project was to have all of the retail below grade. In other words, to keep it very discreetly tucked under the grade. The above grade development was to be for an open public space that would have included a pool of water with seating for the public. There was a green climbing wall that would have brought greenery to the area, and there was a space dedicated for public art installations, which is completely appropriate for Soho. Again, it turned out not to be entirely feasible, but the objective was completely other than this huge, splashy, shouting advertisement that this particular project is going to be. I can just attest that the community was not reached out to here. We are profoundly unhappy with this project and profoundly concerned about it. I use that subway station several times a week. I'm a college professor. I teach uptown. I'm in that station, in and out, a couple of times, 2 days a week, sometimes 3-4 days a week. And I can tell you that I'm one of the people who has to step off the sidewalk into the street on Houston as it stands now in order to get where I need to go. When I come home from my teaching job at night, in the subway station, before we even get up to the ground level, I am sometimes frightened that I'm going to be knocked over by stampedes of people that are in that subway station. I sometimes just freeze because there are hordes of people coming down the stairway. Sometimes when I go card to get into it, there is a lineup of people waiting to swipe their cards to get into the subway station. I appreciate very much Chairman Weisbrod bringing up the point about the bus. I just find it incredible that we would have to outsource a public bus station in order to accommodate this particular project. Additionally, I'm concerned, and I'm thinking, there's been some discussion about that we're working with a different mayor now who ran on a campaign of, Tale of Two Cities. The references to the upscale retail that we're going to have here and the dismissal of the fruit stand on the corner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fleischer. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cynthia Chupin? Chapin? Sorry.
I'm bad at public speaking, so I have notes because I get really nervous. I wanted to say that I've lived in Soho at 480 Broadway for 35 years, and I live between Broome and Grand, where there is no longer any nighttime because of 40,000-foot retail store, Topshop, which is lit up like Times Square all night long. And by the way, they circumvented this process. There was no special permit, and there was no public hearing. I don't face Crosby Street, but I know that my friends and neighbors who live on Crosby Street are disturbed by loading noise at all hours from Topshop. And even though it's supposed to stop at 10, it doesn't. You know, nobody, these rules don't, you know, really get enforced. So I would ask you to at least keep the lighting minimal and not lit up like Times Square, because it's landmark district, it's not Times Square. I also just wanted to add that this has never happened before, but my daughter called me about 2 months ago. She's lived in Soho all her life. She's 28 years old. She called me in a full-on panic attack saying that she was swallowed up by a crowd and she couldn't breathe and she was afraid she would be stampeded. I asked her where she was. She said she was on Houston Street, just outside, you know, near Broadway by the subway station.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapin.
That's it.
Questions? Ms. Battaglia.
First of all, you did very well, and you didn't appear nervous.
Well, I'm shaking.
My question is, I shop Soho. I know the area, and I love the area, to tell you the truth. I don't go down that subway stop, but I've been on many that you feel that way, and that's the city of New York, unfortunately. There's a lot of people at certain hours, and that's not my question. I'm really not as familiar with Crosby Street. I don't walk it. I don't drive it. You mentioned loading, and that it should stop by 10 o'clock, not so as not to, or that's what I absorbed from your testimony, so as not to disturb people overnight when they're trying to sleep, when their children are trying to sleep or study or whatever. Does the unloading cause traffic problems on Crosby?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a woman actually who lives in the co-op across the street, I think it's 39 Crosby, who, when I went about the light issue, because it's also in the back, I face a shaftway, so I went down there to ask them why they had to have the lights on at 11. It was a woman, you know, very frantic and asking them why her driveway was blocked. She couldn't park her car in the garage at 39 Crosby Street. And she said, told me it happens all the time. She lives on, I think, in 4B. She said, I forgot her name.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? With that, we will close the hearing. There is a significant amount of information we certainly want to get from DOT. And if anyone who spoke today has additional information to submit, please do so. The hearing is closed. Madam Secretary.